But first, let's introduce everybody. So we'll start with Malcolm.
Wow, I didn't think I'd go first. Hi, I'm Malcolm. I go by he, him pronouns. I'm a trans guy. I stream the All Trans Mask Everything panel on Twitch. I like talking about trans political issues as like a trans masculine person because the space is pretty heavily dominated by like cis people and trans feminine people. So just kind of do like niche streaming in that kind of avenue. That's kind of like my thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, thank you so much for being with us, my man.
They can't hear.
And then Bluebird.
Howdy, I am Matt Bluebird, and I talk about things and stuff online because it's pretty fun to do, you know. Also, having the right opinion is kind of hard to do, especially when it's not also the popular opinion, but I try my best.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being here. Vosh.
Oh yeah, I'm on Push to Talk. Hey. Very 1984, by the way.
Nice.
Don't appreciate it. Having fun with OBS, fixing things, breaking things. You know how it is. We talked about Antifa earlier. Wait, what are we doing? I'm Vosh. My pronouns are he, him. I'm here. This is probably a perspective you haven't heard that often in your lives. A cis guy. You know, really here to deliver that back-breakingly fresh take. Also, hi. Yeah.
Thanks so much. We needed our token cis guy opinion, so really appreciate you stepping up. Lumi.
Hi, I'm Lumi Rue. I use they, them pronouns. We're just kind of introducing ourselves, right? I talk about gender a lot, men's liberation, women's liberation, and liberation for me too, I guess, as well as just in general intersectional feminism. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you getting back to me so quickly about all that sort of stuff. So thank you so much for being here. And then Jack.
That's me, Riverboat Jack. Hello. I am a socialist. I talk about decommodification, democracy in the workplace, media criticism, etc. I was a journalist for like 7 years in video games. And yeah, I am a trans lady,
Okay,
and
I fixed it.
I like talking about trans issues.
Now
and,
I can play video games.
You know, generally educating people on these topics. So I'm super excited to talk about this on the panel today. I'm interested to hear what other people have to say.
We really appreciate you being here with us. And then last and latest, but hopefully not least, Denims. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sorry about the delay. But yeah, I am Denims. I am the token, I guess, cis woman here for the rest of the audience. And I talk about leftism. I'm a lefty politics person on Twitter, and that's me.
And thank you so much. So, and everyone, hi, I'm Hanz, Hanz Park here. I will be running this panel. I'm just like a typical lefty, like soc dem, market socialist duder on Twitch. I play a lot of Pokemon, I play a lot of Magic the Gathering, and sometimes I cover politics, and I do panels like this every Saturday. So thank you all for joining us. And without further ado, I'm going to go into the discussion format, and then the first topic, and then we'll get started with our opening statements. So our discussion format is a little different than other panels on Twitch. If you haven't been on mine before, here's just the basic rules. Intros and outros. Every person gets 1 minute uninterrupted for their opening statement. At 30 seconds, I will give you the 30-second signal that you are going over time. And I hope my 10 signal is still here. I can't find it. Oh no. I'll make another one. So I'll give you this signal at 30 seconds, and then I have another one that I'll draw very quickly again at 10 seconds, just to let you know about your time. If you go a little bit over for the opening statements, that's totally fine. It's kind of a flex slot there. And after we do the opening statements, so as the last person is giving theirs, we'll start going to a hand raising and list system. So for the first topic, Riverboat Jack's going to be going last. So during her opening statement, everyone's welcome to start raising their hands. I'll put your name on the list, and we'll start going down the list. Once your name's on the list, you can't be on more than once. So I'll give you a thumbs up that you're on the list.
It's not a debate, guys.
So
it's a chill discussion.
Don't worry about keep raising it. If you're on it, you're only on it once. Gish galloping is bad. I call this the Rob Noor rule. So try and keep your speaking time under 2 minutes at any given time, aside from the intros and outros. At the 90-second mark, I'll give you the 30-second thing again. And at 10 seconds left, I'll give you the 10-second thing, and at 2 minutes, I'll tell you to finish your point, and if you keep going, I'll have to cut you off or I'll scream at you or whatever I feel like doing, because I love silencing people. 1984. Exactly. Interruptions sometimes. Please don't interrupt people explicitly while they're speaking. This is supposed to be mostly a collaborative conversation tonight, so hopefully there won't need to be super aggressive interruptions. But if you have a quick question or response for something that someone said, say quick response as I'm throwing it to the next person on the list, so you can ask your question. They can clarify something. If you need to do like a brief back and forth that goes anywhere from like 3 to 5 minutes, we'll let that happen, and then we'll keep going. If someone calls you out by name, if someone says that Denims was late and she's making bad points at any given point in the evening, she is allowed to immediately respond regardless of whether she is on the list, and that won't affect the list. It's just to give people a chance to defend themselves in case like someone's being dogpiled. We try and avoid that. I am a lefty. This is normally for like the conservative versus lefty debates, but I'm only going to be moderating. I'm not going to give my opinions on any of this, on any of these topics. So this is exclusively for the panelists. I'm not going to inject myself or use my mod powers to try and say something. So,
coward.
All right. With that in mind, our first topic of the evening is there value in gender abolition, and how would that affect existing trans and non-binary folks? We're going to go through the opening statements. Then we're going to have about 40 minutes for the general conversation, and then we're going to have a 6-minute closing for everyone before we go to topic number 2. So with that in mind, we're going to go from Denims to Malcolm to Bluebird to Vosh to Lumi, and then finishing with Jack, and then we're going to go in the opposite order for the closers. So Denims,
canceled tonight,
1 minute
boys.
on the clock for your opening statement. Go ahead.
We can't hear you.
Thank you. Sorry. I don't want my key typing to be bothersome to anyone. But we're talking about the gender abolition topic. Just want to make sure.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah. This one's a little bit weird for me because I've seen arguments in favor and both against gender abolition. And it also, I also don't want to be in the position where I feel like I'm talking over people who are gender nonconforming, because I don't know how that would impact me if I was, I suppose, would be the right phrasing there.
I will talk over
It seems
people.
like one of those things that like is kind of far reach to actually try and remove gender altogether from the sphere that exists as our society. And it probably is next to non-existent there. I mean, this is like a dream reality maybe. But yeah, I can't really speak on like how I think it would affect trans and non-binary people, because I don't know. I'd rather give the space up to someone who can speak a little bit better on it.
Thank you so much, Denims. Malcolm.
Okay, so as far as gender abolitionism goes, I think it's important to clarify like what we mean when we talk about gender abolition, because people use it in plenty of different ways. So if we're talking about like just getting rid of the category of gender altogether,
we're going to bust out a new gender theory today.
I think that gender serves a lot of utility, especially for like trans and non-binary people that kind of get validated and being seen as and kind of like recognized as their identified gender. If we're talking about like gender roles, I think gender roles, like love them or hate them, I think they're always going to be a category, even if we have a different name for them. If we're talking about like gender expectations, like men are supposed to behave in this way and women are supposed to behave in this way, we could totally get rid of that. I think that's pretty stupid. I think we could all agree at the very least that gender expectations are pretty cringe. But yeah, my position would be just that I think that gender serves like a really beneficial utility, especially to trans people when we like are seeking validation in our gender. So I'm not really on board with the getting rid of gender altogether, but I do love the idea of getting rid of gender expectations.
Thank you so much. And then Bluebird.
Howdy. Like a lot of classifications in society, gender is kind of just like a shortcut that humans came up with when we were all too dumb to have empathy for people as individuals, you know. So I think that in time, gender is something that'll come in time after a bunch of effort and stuff in the whole like progressive department, once sexism stops being a thing and stuff, regardless of what we do about it. Like, I feel like once it does arrive, for the most part, people will see it in the same way that we in England see people who are Scottish, like spicier and better in every way, but we won't admit it out loud. Otherwise, we'll have nothing left to be proud of. It's just that middle part of how we get there is more the issue, you know?
All right. Thank you, Bluebird. Vosh.
Yeah, okay. I'm happy to get my thoughts. So I think that I think this is a really complicated subject, but generally speaking, it seems to me like when we talk about gender, we are fundamentally talking about gender roles. Any idea as to what a person is constitutes expectations that align with them. You can't be a thing without some expectation of having to be the things associated with those things. And gender seems to be the most pernicious, society engrossing version of this kind of like fundamental category. But I don't think that it really is that distinct from a lot of other categories that we assign to ourselves or that are assigned to us. With this respect, I think that gender abolition would be immensely beneficial for everyone, because every essential desire, every function, every bit of validation that people, cis or trans, look to gender for could continue to exist outside the brackets that gender as a concept places around those ideas. When we talk about gender, we're talking about terms which loosely group together a collection of social values. I think it's possible to get at those values, and there are plenty of things that we would consider feminine and masculine that I think are universally virtuous, you know? Like, I don't know, courage could be like a masculine thing, whatever. We can get those no matter what. I believe in us.
Thank you so much, Vosh. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off there. All right, Lumi.
Gender abolition, I like to. Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, yep.
Now again.
Gender abolition. So I like to think of more as gender liberation, because it seems like some TERFs have taken on gender abolition to say, I don't believe in gender, therefore I'm referring to, for example, binary trans people by their sex pronouns or whatever the case may be. But additionally, I think gender abolition sounds like you're going around and you're trying to snatch up people's pronouns, and you're trying to snatch up all the pink, and you're trying to snatch up like all that, all
No
the
more
men,
cargo
I guess,
shorts.
and make everyone into this like block of genderlessness, where it's really about, again, as a lot of people have reiterated on this panel, it's about getting rid of gender expectations, gender trauma, and gender roles to allow people to be liberated and more free. I think that we will probably still have role models, as Vosh was getting at. Men and women have different cultures or values associated with their femininity, masculinity, and there are positives and negatives in both of those. It's really not about how to be a good man, how to be a good woman, how to be a good non-binary person. It's how do you be a good community member? And that's gender liberation. How do you authentically be yourself and do what is authentically you, rather than emphasizing gender? So I like the concept of sort of undefining gender or liberating gender. And I think by connecting it with that gender liberation movement, you can connect it and learn from the women's liberation movement, what happened to women's gender, the pros and cons of that, what's happening with the men's liberation movement, how we need to
I just
avoid going into
anticipated
positive masculinity.
Wrap it up.
And
Counter arguments, and I've
just
come up to
have it be
counter
gender
arguments.
liberation.
I'm ready.
I was like, I appreciate
Talk
it.
faster, Lumi. Dang.
I'm sorry. I promise we get to it in the general. I don't want to silence non-binary people.
No, that was it.
Every time I tell someone to be
Perfect.
quiet tonight, I'm getting canceled. I'm super ready.
Hans, I
so-
can't believe you.
More like
I-
Hanz of transphobia over here.
So true. I don't.
True.
I love trans people. I just hate women. So Jack is still not safe, and neither is
That's
Denim.
why I'm going last.
I was like,
Dangerous game being
all
played
right,
here.
Jack, go ahead.
A dangerous game.
So I think
Not
there's
even I
a
would go
lot
that
of
far.
misunderstandings around what gender abolition actually means, because when researching the topic, you come across people who think like gender abolition would essentially mean like the genocide of trans people. Like there are people who legitimately like go that far, like it would erase trans people from existence. And that's just not really what it's about. It's about eliminating the prescriptivist notion of gender, what you ought to be. And really, when we talk about what a man ought to be, what a woman ought to be, these are gendered in a way that I think fundamentally harms a great deal, many people. And when we talk about would trans people still exist? Well, you know, people would still be getting medical treatment. The medical treatment doesn't like go away if like we have an ungendered world. Instead, we'd be talking about what humans ought to be. And we could be talking about, you know, strength being a positive quality for everyone. You know, we could be talking about how being a homemaker, positive quality for people who want to be homemakers. These are, we get rid of the gendered ought. And I think we would be off a better world, to be completely honest.
Thank
More
you so much,
poggers
Jack. All right,
around.
we're going to move into the general now. So everyone's welcome to start raising their hands. A lot of people said like a lot of different stuff during that, so we can take this any way we want. We'll keep it at 40 minutes. If everyone ends up like agreeing like hyper fast and like no one has anything else to say, that's why we have 3 topics. Don't worry, we can definitely move faster if we need to move faster. So who wants to start on this?
I mean, I can start.
Okay.
I'm happy to talk.
I was like, did we do it? Did we solve? Did we solve gender in just the opener? Like,
I'll jump
we're so
in.
good at this game. Like, holy shit! Go ahead, Jack, and
Wait
everyone. You're
for
welcome to
it.
start raising your hands while she's going. So you feel free to keep going, Jack.
So I came across like a really interesting analogy while looking up different arguments for and against like gender abolition, right? And one of those that analogy essentially was looking at the case of samurai in the 1800s.
My
right?
argument.
And when we talk about, you know, the samurai, there are people who had being a samurai core to their identity.
Oh my fucking god,
right?
it's literally
And
my argument.
despite like a century or two of the decline of the social relevance of samurai, there were still people in like the 1870s in Japan who being a samurai was their entire life. It was core to their identity. But then there came a decree that essentially abolished the samurai as like a class. And it basically split samurai into 2 different groups. There were people who were like, well, this sucks. This is terrible. I have lost what makes me me, and I don't know how to deal with that. And then there were other people who were like, well,
This is fucked up.
I am now a statesman. I am now a business owner. I am now a father. And I think that given the social support, one of the big determinators, by the way, was social support of these people going through this social transition, right? Their families supporting them, their friends supporting them, and how well that they were able to kind of transition to this new world where being a samurai wasn't applicable anymore. And so when we look at that in the case of like trans people or gendered people in general, I think that what we see is that perhaps we can have declining relevance. We can have declining relevance of prescriptivist notions of gender over a long, long period of time, and get to the point where it's no longer applicable because we do not have these strong applications of what gender ought to be for people based on
Just
you know,
Cowboys
sex,
instead.
and that I think that that is a hugely positive thing.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in if I may.
Go for it.
I think that was an excellent argument, you know? If you were to take like a Roman legionary, you know? This is a person who has a very strong idea on the difference between a Roman citizen and a barbarian, right? I mean, they care a great deal about this. In fact, I imagine to many people of their time, this was like a life or death thing, you know? They assigned great importance to it. And imagine going back and telling one of those Roman legionaries, you know, in 1,000 years, this will mean nothing. Your empire will be dust. There will be no difference between a Roman and a legionary because nobody will even use those terms anymore. I imagine they'd feel pretty bad about it. But the fundamental values they might ascribe to Roman citizenship, you know, maybe they think it corresponds to honor or virtue or community. Those things persist. The labels we've given don't, but the terms we use, at least temporarily, to ascribe them, those all fall to ash. So I think that might be where we are with gender. I fail to understand what fundamental components of our personhood we would lose in the absence of gender. It seems like, if anything, it would just make it easier for people, cis or trans, to adopt whatever ideas it is there would be. Even for trans people in such a society who feel dysphoria, at least the dysphoria would be non-essentialist. It would be purely physiological. My body looks like X, but I want it to look like Y. As simple as that. It wouldn't be, my body looks like X, which makes me less of a woman, so I need to do Y to look like more of a woman. Maybe the underlying dysphoria hasn't changed, but certainly the social baggage around it has been lessened, which, again, I'm cis, but I imagine that would make things easier.
Malcolm.
I kind of wanted to go back a little bit to something that Lumi said earlier, where they were talking about like some of the almost like the roots of gender abolitionism kind of has a foot in like radical feminism. And they brought up like the idea that some people think that gender
That is true.
abolitionism is like the idea of like taking away gender from people.
Yoink.
And I think that's why a lot of trans people are kind of like skeptical of gender abolitionism as a whole, because like when a lot of people talk about it, a lot of people that do talk about it are either like
Did you
radical
just change
feminists
samurai
or
for
TERFs,
Roman?
and their idea is like gender is useless. We should go back to
there have been
biological
other
sex,
arbitrary
is like a
characteristics that people have had
categorical,
life or
like,
death feelings about.
like how we would categorize trans people essentially. And so I think if we're talking in the context of like kind of getting rid of gender roles or like gender expectations, I think something that's really important that a lot of people gloss over a lot of the time is that trans people would still exist. I know that Jack and Vosh were both kind of talking about that in the way that like we would still. I think the example that a lot of people will use is like if you're on like a desert island and there's other people around, but there's no like society, are you still going to be trans? And I think that a lot of people will still have that like I don't want to say like physiological, but like physical desire to like alter their appearance. So I just wanted to like reinforce the idea that like even in like a post-gender society, like if we go like, you know, however many years in the future or whatever, that there still would be trans people. And just to like emphasize that like the roots of the idea that gender abolitionism is like a radical feminist ideology and that trans people just wouldn't exist. This is how we get rid of the trans people essentially, is just like not like that's just like not true. So I just wanted to kind of reinforce that.
Yeah.
True.
This seems like relatively free flowing. So if it starts getting like crazy and like people are like screaming at each other, we'll go back to the list system. But I feel like this is like probably the first conversation I've ever hosted that it's not like contentious enough that people are screaming at each other. So if someone says something that you would really like to respond to, feel free to just jump in. If you feel like you're not being able to get in, just raise your hand and I'll try and insert you in that at some point. So yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, to kind of build on what Malcolm was talking about, I think that there's a very reasonable emotional reaction that a lot of trans people have when they hear the term gender abolition, because it does sound very similar to the rhetoric used by TERFs. It does sound very similar to like, oh, we're going to just like make you not exist anymore. And the term itself seems to almost be an attack against trans people in the sense that like a lot of trans people in the current day have struggled very, very hard to live and be who they are, and it makes a lot of us very defensive of the concept of gender. And I think that's 100% very understandable, and that's why in my opening statement I tried to talk about how we're getting rid of the ought, you know, the prescriptivist notion of gender. Trans people in general have already taken one of the first steps towards gender abolition, which is decoupling gender from sex. That is one of the cornerstones of gender abolition, after all. And so when we're talking about this, it is on people who understand what gender abolition is to be able to effectively communicate that concept to people who are hesitant because of the terminology itself.
Thank you, Jack.
Oh, we can't hear you.
Oh,
sorry.
I wasn't sure if you were talking. Wait, is it push talk for everybody? Like for whatever reason?
No,
like
not me.
Oh,
Mine is
what
not.
the fuck?
Like
I knew it.
I've got biker boys that'll go outside my window, so you need spared from the biker boys. I got your back.
Whatever. It means I get to talk to you guys more. What's up, guys?
No, that's one of the reasons I really, really like switching over to gender liberation is, so normally I don't just switch all my language because there's a misunderstanding or a co-option of a term. Like, for example, a lot of people will push me and say, why do you call yourself a feminist rather than an egalitarian? And there's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is that pulls me away from a deep history of feminism and what I've learned from. And of course, I don't stay with all of those ideas, but I see how this fight against sexism has gone and improved, and the failures that have been there that I can learn from. And that's so important. Now with gender abolition, I think there are a lot of reasons to shift though. It's that co-option, but I also think that just the language ties it to these other movements like men's liberation and women's liberation, and it brings it all together. But I also, and I think we can learn from those movements in gender abolition. Let's not create more constructs or redraw our constructs per se and implement the policing around that. for example. And then I think it does evoke a better sense of what to me is gender abolition. It's liberation. You're moving forward. Nothing's being taken away except for, in my opinion, those roles, those expectations, something that's been imposed, prescribed, and pushed onto people. So to me, that sounds like liberation, which I know, kind of a silly semantics thing, but I find it useful.
Shoe behave.
Jack.
So one of the issues that I have encountered when trying to talk about this is specifically in decolonial like conversations, specifically like around like Native Americans, for example, and a part of the colonial effort against Native American cultures was erasing like the concept of like two-spirit people, for example. And so it can I also understand why gender abolition would raise like the hackles of people who are trying to reclaim their cultural roots that have been attempted to be stamped out by colonial endeavors. And so this is why whenever talking about gender abolition, I think we need to be talking about it as something that is while it is currently happening due to the decoupling of sex and gender ideas, we need to be aware that like when we talk about this in our rhetoric, like the idea of gender abolition isn't even something that will be psychologically possible for large swaths of people until like the future at some point, like probably not within our lifetimes, you know, because of like the decolonial project often embraces these older gender notions, like that's part of it, or at least it seems to be part of it. And I don't want to talk for those communities. I just something that has been brought up whenever I talk about it.
Thank you, Jack. I guess I would like to. Denim's. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that we could probably agree that like, or maybe not, but like gender is probably something that most people have a strong attachment to, right? Or maybe not most people, but a good portion of people probably have a very strong attachment to it, right? And I think that like it's the same reason that certain people will stay in like cults or something, or like will be strongly attached to something like conservatism, right? It's because it's like, well, this is where I belong, and I'm a woman, and I belong to, you know, the category that is women, and so I want to enforce these because then it makes me feel like more of a woman or something like that, right? So what exactly, I guess because I'm curious about what the other people on the panel have to say, what would even be like the steps that would be possible to move people on their positions about gender, or like how would a society even shift from, at least in US culture, pretty heavily gendered to not so much?
Well, I would say we all become Hufflepuffs, but J.K. Rowling, I tell you what, I do think it might have to go towards a little bit of just structuring your identity around something else. For me, I identify with a lot of things not associated with my gender, right? We have roles we play in societies. We consider ourselves maybe compassionate people. There are other identities that I think we can emphasize more. I think that's one of the struggles right now in the men's liberation movement is some people are feeling very lost, and so they're reconceptualizing masculinity and this positive masculinity. But we've seen that in the women's liberation movement and women pushing their daughters and pushing themselves for a lot of like understandable reasons that have social context as well, but like reformulating what it is to be a woman while trying to subvert that. And I think maybe by just going into de-emphasizing how gender matters, and you've got to have something to put there, right? Like, not to be the fucking vegan on the panel, but if you go vegan by just removing stuff from your diet and you don't add in all the cool, awesome vegan shit, you're going to be sad and you're going to be confused and you're going to be lost. And that's awful.
Thank you, Lumi. Denim, does that answer your question? Because if it did, we're going to throw it to Vosh. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Go ahead, V.
All right. Yeah, I think I agree completely with Lumi with regards to building a positive identity around that. I think that it's such a long way to go too. Not just like with people talk about this as like a decolonialist project as well. How do we affect different cultures? How do we navigate that space responsibly without being sort of culturally chauvinist towards them? We got to remember, we're not exactly very close to gender abolition on the home front at all. The majority of Americans would be willing to bet, to them, gender is literally what's in their pants. They are the meme, you know. We're at about that level. And look, I mean, a ton of work has been done. There's a huge rural and like city divide on this, you know, where a lot of businesses these days will ask for pronouns, but a lot of people, like if you go a couple miles out of a city, like a lot of these ideas are completely foreign to them. There is a pretty huge gap in terms of accessibility to this information and cultural affect. I think it's not so much about, I don't know if cultural chauvinism is a huge issue at the moment, because it feels like right now we can't even progress this ideal beyond like the passive moral advocacy for de-emphasizing gender as an essential part of human identity. And that's, I think, a universally moral thing to push for. You could do that here to Saudi Arabia. I think that's just generally a good thing to believe in. Anything beyond that, though, like restructuring the way that law considers gender or factors that stuff in, I feel like, God knows, we might be like a century away from that. If we ever even got it, we might be a very long time from that. But now I think we're kind of seeing like a modern renaissance of at least broaching those ideas, and I think that's nice.
Thank you, Bosch. We're going to throw it to Jack.
So yeah, one of the issues that I see is that generally, like Vosh said, like we're pretty far away. Like when we're talking about gender abolition at all, that already puts us like way outside the realm of like normies, you know? So what really does need to be done, and I think one of the first steps here, is pointing out that gender is demonstrably not related to your sex. Like if you look at the idea of gender anywhere around the world, you find a great deal of variation that has nothing to do with your sex. And PBS put together, and this is a resource I use all the time to just kind of like point this out to people who are new to this idea, put together like this interactive map back in 2015 of gender diverse cultures. And it's really, really helpful at kind of pointing out that at different points in time, different places around the world and different large-scale communities, small communities have had different ideas of gender.
I remember that
had nothing to do with
it was
sex.
a big like
and
chart.
That's a super
and
helpful
the most
thing
womanly
to
woman
point
was your
out,
mom.
because any anthropological understanding of how gender has worked in society understands that it is very, very little to do with sex and biology. And having that be a part of basic education for people, I think would be extremely helpful, because once we decouple it, like gender from the idea of sex, I think that there is kind of this, I found this to be true in a lot of trans people. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush here, but a lot of trans people that I know kind of nod our heads in agreement when we say like gender's bullshit, you know, so I think once you decouple these two ideas, we see through this this facade, and it gets us closer to a world where there are no prescriptivist notions of gender, because we better understand what gender is.
Memes aside, I like this a lot.
Thank
I feel like
you.
back in 2019,
I think
nobody but me was
on top
talking
of
about
that
gender
too,
abolitionism.
as
It
far
felt
as
that
like
way.
kind of decoupling the idea of biological sex and gender, usually like biological sex determining like gender or gendered behavior would be like normalizing the idea that like certain behaviors are not biologically innate and therefore not gendered. So like generally like the idea that women do like X, Y, and Z, like women go into like teaching, or like women paint their nails, or like women have long hair, and you know, men like build houses and shit like that.
She went ahead.
Just
That's
normalizing
sex.
the idea
You would
that
just
like,
say you're
and I think
sex
that
when
we're
you
kind
go
of
to the doctor.
moving towards that kind of that understanding, right? Like we see like more women entering like quote unquote male dominated fields and vice versa and things like that. Like women are overtaking the men at the college, which is beautiful. Things like that, where we're kind of like getting rid of the idea that like women like doing like womanly things, whatever the fuck that means. So I think that like maybe we're like a little bit closer than we think we are, just with kind of like the progression of how we're kind of like prying apart, like you're a woman, therefore you must want to have kids and like make a home and things like that. That's kind of like dying for the most part, which is pretty cool.
Thank you, Malcolm. I will throw it to Bluebird, and I'd like to remind everyone we have about 8 minutes left before we go to closers for this. If you want to say anything about this, make sure you jump in.
I don't care if
once
it's a
Bluebird
woman.
has finished. So go ahead.
Yeah. All
But
right.
if you're my
so,
partner, you better
we
be
like
able to
to
cook
talk
because I
about,
can't cook
like,
for shit.
what was it?
Okay?
We were talking about like how we solve these things, like because I like in terms of like how we get to a gender abolitionist space. I guess I think was something along those lines was I think what Denims was talking about. But I think we need to realize that a lot of this conditioning is entirely developmental. Like I like to point to the concept of neuroplasticity when we talk about these types of things. But like from the ages of 0 to 5, our brain is literally goo. Like I have a friend who's raising their kid without gender, like to their best attempts, of course. And a lot of that kid's ideas behind gender are like incredibly woke.
Newborn
based,
babies'
if you will.
heads just feel like titties.
But like I like to
Like you
point,
just slap
point
one end
to
and the
a
fat
study
just
by
kind of rolls.
Colette Dowling, where like I can't remember, or at least she references it in her book, The Frailty Myth. It's a good book, check it out, by the way. But it raises the entire like question of whether gender is even like biological, like to the point of like physicality, you know, like because back when you have children who are like children at like ages like 0 or 1, if you get people to try and like encourage them to like climb up a slope or something, I can't remember the exact specifics, but if you get the children to climb up the slopes, the color of the shirt those children wear, the adults, if it's wearing a pink shirt, the child is encouraged up to 40% less than the child who has a plain white shirt or a blue shirt, you know? So like a lot of these things can be like, could be attributed to like up to the point of like day minus 270 when children are conceived.
It really is like
the parents
super
like,
fucked how young kids
know,
start learning gender shit, though.
like very, you know, I don't know how to finish the sentence, but yeah. I think I got out the general like ideas.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bluebird. Jack.
Yeah. So first off, that was super interesting, Bluebird. And second off, one of the things that I think is a pitfall for people who argue against gender abolition is
that they're dumb.
The idea that we can reform gender into a static thing where that will preserve equity or equality, right? And I don't think that work. It doesn't work that way, right? Like you can easily imagine a world in which boys were encouraged 40% less, and that resulted in like kids who wore blue shirts being encouraged less, and so like, and we see this happen again throughout history. Like different cultures have had different expectations of behavior. Like I think it was in ancient Greece that like women were supposed to be like the sexually aggressive gender, and like when we look at gendered expectations and how
ancient Greece was full of those 4chan green text posts where Chad men would reject women's advances.
We run the risk
They'd
if
be
we
like, fuck
take
me,
the
and
reform
he'd be like,
route
no, I have math
of,
to learn.
Perhaps just flipping the paradigm on its head, more girl boss soldiers, like and it's just like that doesn't fundamentally solve the problem, right? It just flips the paradigm on its head. It seems novel to us now, but if that were the norm, it would also not be good for a lot of people.
Thank you, Jack. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think like as we filter people up through power as well, especially if like you're not changing things culturally, you're just like pushing women into toxically masculine behaviors or toxic masculinity, depending on the environment. Like you'll see that in the military, for example, and that really shows it's not about like dudes being toxic. It's about a specific form of toxicity that's about domination and maintaining hierarchy. And let me tell you what, a lady with a vagina can do that just as well as a dude with a dick or any of those parts flipped around. So,
yeah.
But I think we also see that shift in how we need to avoid that shift in the mistakes we made in the women's lib movement and back, like, I think wave 2 of feminism. It's just like, let's not make that mistake again.
Thank you. Lumi, I think that's a great place to go into closers. So we're going to start with Jack, and then Lumi, then Vosh, then Bluebird, then Malcolm, and then finishing with Denims. So Jack, 1 minute on the clock. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think
I'm trying to make
that,
chat more readable, but I don't
ultimately
care anymore. I'm just gonna
the
change.
idea that you ought to be something based arbitrarily on the idea of like that we've packaged primarily around genitalia. I think that that's a really cringe idea. I think it's still cringe even if we manage to decouple those traits. There's nothing inherently dick related about being aggressive or sexually interested in people. And I there's nothing
Yep.
inherently vagina related about, caring about others and empathy, like, so let's just throw out these gendered notions. Let's not repeat like the discriminatory behavior of the past, and let's move forward together and figure out how to be better humans, how humans ought to be, rather than how men and women and non-binary people ought to be. Let's maximize the freedom we all enjoy together.
Thank you, Jack. I didn't want to cut her off, so just to be fair to everybody, we're going to give everyone 70 seconds for their closer. Please try and stick to that. I'll make sure to let you know with the cards as well. So go ahead, Lumi.
I'm hearing that point of I really like the terminology gender liberation because we avoid a lot of the issues. I really do think it's about liberating people. Or I know Justin Baldoni on his podcast, Man Enough, talking all about men, their masculinity, and how to undefine it. He really focuses on that concept of undefining as well, which I guess is similar to like gender abolishing, but it's almost like, I don't know, some of the language around that. I have to say, I learned from Jack mentioning on the decolonization and tying that point in on the erasure of genders we've seen, not just with indigenous peoples, but also with how we've enforced gender binaries on the people that have been brought over and enslaved, and how that influenced there as well. So I really appreciate that, really making me think about the concept of the language we use, which, isn't the most important thing as the depth of what it means to liberate gender and the steps to get there. And I hope that's just finding identities that work better for all of us and aren't putting us in these weird areas where dudes are supposed to be sexually assertive and women are supposed to be like, nah, and it's just like awkward. Like, can we get off that and just all be out there doing things we want to do, including the other people we want to do? Like, let's
Including
go.
anal.
Heyo.
Hey, sex havers rise up. Nice.
I'm sitting down still.
I was like, oh, Vaj.
Yeah, I think that people are always going to self-categorize. Maybe if we abolish gender, people would start, like, I don't know, aligning themselves along the four humors or something, There'd be phlegmatic and catonic and sanguine and what have you. I don't really know. I don't like gender because it seems to be essentialized to sex, and it feels like that leads to a lot more problems. We have plenty of terms and categorizations which are less toxic than others. Nationality can be pretty bad. Race can be pretty bad, and what that's led to, socially as a product of categorization. But we also have gamers. That is unironically a type of social categorization that people self-ascribe in order to change self-perception and affect others' perceptions of them. That is unironically a thing. Now, obviously, it's not the same degree of importance and what have you, and there are other connotations lacking, but it's important, and I just think that, I don't know, maybe in the future, we have cooler categories that are less essentialized. Maybe we have more, maybe we have fewer. I'm hoping towards more. Seems like the more choice you get, the better, like more tools in the toolkit. But yeah, I just think it'd be cool to explore that.
It's true. In the future, we will only have gamer and non-gamer. Those will be the two categories.
Absolutely.
The two genders.
Yeah.
I know it sounds joking, but I believe it when I say that.
It's going to be based off what faction you play in 40K. That's the truth. Let's go. Orc gang. All right, anyway, Bluebird, go ahead.
Ultimately, like, humans categorize again because we're too
I wasn't
lazy
gonna
and
soy
dumb
today.
to like not categorize.
I wasn't the one who soyed
like,
today.
I think we'll eventually stop being able to categorize once we reach like some level of fully automated robo-communism or something. But ultimately, like, gender abolition is going to take a long time to get there, like on a generational level type of long time. And like, it's going to take a while to get us to the point where we fully wipe our brains of gender and make space for gender too, you know?
Yeah, if gender's so good, where is gender?
Thank you
too?
so much, Bluebird. Malcolm.
I think the more important conversation to have is how we're going to abolish gamers. I'm just kidding.
Wait,
just kidding.
why did you say
In the future,
I'm just kidding.
in the future, that'll be
gosh.
hate speech when there's no gender and only gamer. That'll be like,
Listen, I
it's
will go to
TOS.
jail with pride. My fucking chin held high. I'll be like, take me, boys. I'm ready to go.
It's rough out here for us.
200, you're going to live to regret that.
I know I'll be in jail with space luxury, gay communism, inflated lifespan. I'll be like 1,000,000 years old and be like, "Fuck, I shouldn't have condemned the gamers."
Make me louder. I'm just
so
not
I
talking.
think that,
Okay, fine.
Everything we talked about was cool. I think that we are kind of getting towards like that gender abolitionist perspective. I don't love the idea of like gender abolition. I think the gender liberation, like Lumi pointed out earlier, is like a better term. It's a little bit more inclusive, in my opinion. I think that if we try to get rid of like gendered expectations and like heavily associated gender roles, that's better than abolishing gender, because gender is like something that trans people I think really benefit from as far as like being validated and like kind of fitting into their own little niche, things like that. I think another thing that's really important too that we kind of talked about a little bit is just kind of trying to stay away from like the implications that gender abolitionism is sometimes and often hijacked by like TERFs and radical feminists, and sometimes they weaponize that to be like, yeah, I hate gender too, wink wink, but you're actually a female, and you're just like, great, thank you. Sounds fantastic. And then Vosh also mentioned that like we'll kind of always recategorize, and I think that's one reason that I am kind of like on like the side about gender abolitionism, because I think that we'll recategorize ourselves anyway. If anybody's ever read The Star-Bellied Sneetches by Dr. Seuss, it's just kind of how we are because we're dumb monkeys. And then I would also just like to correct Jack and let her know that my vagina is in fact empathetic and you are wrong. So just want to let you know.
Thank you. Thank you,
I
Malcolm.
couldn't get away with this.
All right. The final arbiter on trans and non-binary issues, Denims, final word on this topic. Whatever you say is law. Tread carefully.
Oh God. Okay. I was actually going to say that like I really liked what Jack said earlier when she was talking about specifically how the gender roles that currently exist in society just force people a lot of the time to push back really hard in a way that isn't really very healthy at all. Like a big one, for example, is like you'll see how like women will treat men in an unempathetic way
When you shit
because
too
they
hard.
want to appear like they're not super feminine, because there are such negative connotations with being like feminine and being weak and stuff like that. And these gender roles that exist are really just like harming people for no reason, whether they're forcing themselves to fit into a category or pushing really strongly back against it. Not to mention that like there's like weird stuff that goes along with gender roles where I think that like we'll see like, for example, like cis women who will try and push back against gender roles and will, for example, refuse to shave, right? But this isn't something that like trans women are allowed to do in like the public space, because then they're just being lazy or something like that, right? Fucking, you know, TERF logic, whatever. And it's just really gross and really cringe for no reason. Just let people do whatever they want, and we really shouldn't have to feel the need to conform in any way.
Great. Thank you so much, Adams. And thank you all so much for an excellent first topic. We are going to move right to topic 2. There will be a brief break after topic 2 before we go into topic 3. So if anyone like has to sprint like to the bathroom or get water right now, like I'll just move you to the end.
This is so
but if
well
not,
structured.
let's get started with topic number 2. I'm going to randomize everyone a little bit here, so we have different starting points, different people speaking first and last and middle and all that sort of stuff. Do that very quickly. All right. So this topic, our second topic, is how does performativity and modern gender roles affect the trans, non-binary, and non-conforming experience? And if we want to extrapolate that out to cis, after we like, if you have to use that as part of the conversation, you're welcome to do that
you have to.
as well. So with that in mind, everyone seemed to go over the time just a little bit, so I'm going to just like extend it to 75 seconds so everyone has time to get the thoughts out and not feel like they have to be like smacked down, because I don't want to yell at anybody right now for completely unpersonal reasons. So we're gonna go with Jack first, and then Lumi, then Denims, then Malcolm, then Bluebird, and then finishing with Vosh, and then we're gonna go back in the opposite order. So Jack, 75 seconds on the clock. Take it away.
So when it comes to like performativity and modern gender roles, specifically affecting like trans people, it's a bit of I've noticed a bit of a split, right? Because on the one hand, there are people who will go out and hyper perform femininity, hyper perform masculinity, and to some degree, that is largely a survival mechanism because we know that the current conception and construction of gender in our society tends to, punish those who step outside of those lines, and that can be for trans people actually dangerous. Not just like people being mean to you, but like physically assaulting you or trying to even murder you, right? Like you'll just be minding your own business in public, try and go to the bathroom, and someone could assault you if it's
There's
like
nothing
the
in the
wrong person
universe
is in
more
there,
dangerous than reading a funny
so
message in chat
for
right when
a
something
lot of
serious
people,
in the
it
panel
is a
being said.
survival mechanism, and this can make presenting the way you would want to with otherwise very, very difficult for a lot of people in the trans community. So that's my rambly way of saying I'm excited to talk about this.
Thank you so much, Jack. Lumi. Oh, you're muted.
Can't hear
That's
you.
true.
You're muted.
Oh, I was saying I
Oh.
got caught in the weeds looking at this one, and then I got caught in the not pressing the button. So it's just rough out here. Judith Butler is kind of where my understanding of performativity comes in at, and it really shifted us from essentializing or problematized things into that things are performative. And so I really got stuck on that and diving back into it. And so I was really just excited to hear everyone talk about their experience on it. But I know specifically as a non-binary person, I have struggled in terms of how do I relate myself to our modern gender roles now, and how do I perform that properly, especially feeling like, and I'm glad it's shifting, and I'm seeing more and more non-binary people out here being incredibly diverse. And I want to say thank you. I appreciate you being out there and being visible, because that
You're welcome.
lessens the pressure on me, because I'm always like, how do I perform non-binariness in a way that's fair to people as an online creator, knowing that we have that being in the minority and not being seen a lot. It feels like there's a lot more pressure for me to perform non-binariness in a way that people will accept and understand and lead that education on that. So I think modern gender roles are kind of stressful and cringe for non-binary people, and all the people's understanding of what non-binary is. Sometimes I think people are understanding me as like woman light, and that's something you hear a lot from non-binary people. And again, I think that's the struggle towards gender liberation, that people mean so well and they're trying their best, but man, modern gender roles, they're doing a number on us.
Thank you, Lumi. Denims.
Yeah,
I'm going to change tack to disorient the enemy.
I mean,
Okay?
basically what
Next time I
Lumi
speak,
said
I'll
here,
come out
but I want to
pro-gender
add
role.
on that, like, I think that the biggest problem
Keep
with
'em-
the current way
keep
that
'em on their
gender
toes.
roles work, I guess, in society is that, like, when specifically for people who are gender non-conforming and also with people who are
Discombobulated.
cis, there are a lot of instances where you are maybe questioning why you like something or want to do something or you dislike something. Sort of with regard to cis women, it's like the hatred of the color pink for absolutely no reason, and then being like, you know what, actually pink is a good color. Why did I hate it for no reason? That's dumb. But yeah, I think that like the bigger problem that I have with how these, or like one of the bigger problems that I have with performativity is not being able to know whether or not you want something because you think society wants that of you, and whether or not you want something because you genuinely want that thing.
Thank you, Denims.
So true.
Malcolm.
So I think that it's kind of like a double-edged sword, like the existence of like gender performativity and then like gender roles in modern society for trans people. because I think that there is like a significant amount of validation and kind of just like inclusion and just like feels good, man, that you can get out of like being able to be accepted as like the gender that you identify with from outside people, right? Like that's pretty dope. But it also, in a same sense, like can be really restrictive and really oppressive for people that like one aren't able to like be seen physically like as they identify as, people that maybe don't want to, people that just like don't give a shit. These kinds of people are restricted by that, as well as like trans people before they transition. Like for myself, before transitioning, I felt gender roles to be like pretty restrictive and like pretty fucked up. But after transitioning, I find a lot of validation and just like a lot of solace in being able to like be seen and like appreciated for like how I identify. I think that Lumi brings up a really good point that this is like an extra like contemptuous position for non-binary people to be in, because the expectation for non-binary people is to usually be like skinny, white, AFAB, androgynous. Like I want to be able to look at you and not know if you're a boy or a girl. Like that's the expectation for non-binary people. So I think at least from my perspective as a binary trans person, I think that it is a double-edged sword, because I can see and like experience the restrictions before, and then I can appreciate the validation and inclusion that comes with the after as well. So I think it's kind of like a little bit of both.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. Bluebird.
Howdy. I think
You guys are
gender
gonna get me in trouble if you
performativity
keep
is the
making me laugh. I had
capitalism
to
of
just-
gender theory, in the
I had to
sense
just take
that
my
it
chat
kind
off
of
screen
promotes
for
the
like
idea
3
that if you
minutes.
try hard enough to get it, then you definitely can. But that's not how it works, you know? Like, I think that performativity in particular, this idea that gender is what you perform, it's kind of flawed it's a flawed way of seeing things, in my view, because sure, we see performativity as like wearing a dress or a suit means you're a woman or a man or vice versa. But also we think things like beard or like big old bazoombas or like burgeoning eyebrow ridge or something. And some people just can't control these things in the same way we can control our clothes and our mannerisms. And even that one's a bit shaky due to like biological or wealth differences. Not all of us can afford to get surgery. Not all of us are biologically in California, for example. And like once these problems
that.
go away, thanks. And once these problems go away and we live in like this post-scarcity space-based robo-communism, then maybe we'll solve that and performativity will be okay. But by then we'll probably have come up with a better way of doing gender, you know? Because performativity ultimately is just a way of like externalizing the internal processes that cause our brains to make the electric gender juice. And that's always going to be a flawed process because of how language works, how we see things on ourselves versus how we see other people. And like there's a lot more to
Razor,
talk
what
about
comment?
in terms of language, believe me, which we get to the third question. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bluebird. And I'm excited for question 3 as well. All right. Last opener. Vosh, everyone, you're welcome to start raising your hands in any way you want to take the general. I see you, Jack. Vosh, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, it seems like so often conformity to certain gender expectations is more about avoiding a negative than affirming a positive for cis and trans people, though the consequences are far more severe for the latter, you know? Like as a cis guy, for example, I know that a lot of guys adopt a lot of like machismo traits, a lot of behaviors, mannerisms, adopt dress, whatever, mostly because they're trying to avoid getting called like a sissy or whatever else, you know? And of course, if you're trans, sometimes the consequences to failing to hold these expectations can be more damaging, lethal even. And I think that really sucks, right? I mean, ideally, like people who really play into a group category would do so because they love that group category. It wouldn't be out of fear, you know? Some people do, of course. I mean, there are trans people who wear the pinkest dresses, you know, and that's great, you know, but I think that holistically, a lot of this is kind of a fear-driven. You crowd into categories as significantly as you can to avoid being the caricature of what people would attack you with otherwise. It's why short guys overcompensate. It's why a lot of girls wear makeup and spend 2 hours a day putting it on, even though they know they don't want to. And it's why a lot of trans people have to hyper-perform masculinity or femininity in order to avoid the worst stereotypes about their groups. Of course, it's not the only reason people do any of these things, but it definitely contributes. So it's not, you know, not great, that.
Thank you so much, Vosh. All right, we're going to throw it into the general. We're going to have about 35 minutes for this topic in the general before we go to closers. So, Jack and everyone else, feel free to start raising your hands while Jack is speaking as well. And if it goes into like the general conversation thing like last time, that's absolutely fine as well. So, Jack, go ahead.
First off, Electric Gender Juice is my new band name. Second
Hey,
off,
I'll copyright it.
second off,
Capitalism
yeah,
wins
I
again.
love hearing the input of like performativity when it comes to NB folks, because that has been something like I've always wondered about non-binary
I
people,
hate it.
and I don't hear this talked about that often. So that was super interesting. Thank you for your insight. And to Denham's point, not knowing whether you like something because of gender expectations or because you genuinely like it is like such a trans feeling too. Like when I realized I was trans, I went through a whole process of deconstructing my own identity and breaking down like do I like Firefly because it's genuinely a great show, or do I like it because all of my male friends liked it? And you know, I'm still not sure about Firefly, okay? But it's a whole process. It's very difficult. And yeah, this whole reward punishment system for gender is something that I think that everyone, even cis people, knows at the very least subconsciously, right? Like if you ask any man, like why is the only situation in which you'd like willingly wear a dress one in which you would get like you're doing it for the laughs? Well, they know, like they know why they don't go to prom in like a dress when they're a cis straight dude. You know, they know the gendered expectations, even if they don't know how to articulate that in a conversation, right? And I do think that that's a very interesting thing because it is negatively reinforced. And on the flip side, for a lot of trans people, and I think this is kind of maybe the next stage of like trans liberation, is being able to more effectively reward non-binary people for performing non-binariness. Because when it comes to trans men,
Cookies, by the way.
True.
I make great cookies. I will bake you cookies.
Bet.
This panel is so good.
Score.
It's like,
But it, like binary trans people, we get very much rewarded for performing gender roles, right? For performing femininity, for performing masculinity. Like you can see how this happens when people post like, oh, here's my transition photo. I was a big beardy man and now I'm a small petite lady. And like it would be great if we could move
Bazinga.
away from that and just and I'm not
Oh,
entirely
God.
sure how we do that. That's one of the difficult things for me. So I'm interested in hearing ideas from the panel on that one.
thank you so much, Jack. And I'm sorry that I have to mute you for the rest of the night for talking shit about Firefly. But I want you to know that I appreciate what you said anyway.
Is that because you're a man, Hans? Are you asserting your cis privilege in this
Absolutely.
conversation?
I love oppressing women. Who wants to go next?
Hey, the episode where the episode
I
where
feel
they
like
get
that
kidnapped
was
by space hillbillies. It's terrible.
Livia,
Honestly, that felt like
and then Vosh. Yeah.
it felt like Schrodinger's shit talking from Jack. I didn't see it was like Schrodinger shit talking in Firefly. I just wanted to clarify that. It felt very important. But I did want to ask one thing.
What's Firefly? Is that a band?
No, it's a song by
Oh, it's a show.
Oh,
It's a type of bug.
Oh,
No,
no.
I'm not standing a bug. I'm standing Malcolm
I feel
Reynolds, the king, and the Firefly gang.
You're standing The South Will Rise Again,
Wait,
but
like,
in
what
space? Okay.
No,
I'm serious. What do I Google? What do I Google?
I think you just
I'm
Google
actually
Firefly TV show.
I have to regain control of this panel. We have a list now.
This
It's gonna go to
combobulate.
Bosch, and then it's going to go to Malcolm,
This
and Jack's going to
combobulate.
stop bullying me. So go ahead, Bosch.
Yeah, I think while this is definitely probably more of a thing for trans people, the whole do I like this because gender or because I actually like a thing, I see a lot of people struggle with that. For me, it's guys with suits, you know? Suits are a pain in the ass to wear. They're not especially comfortable, even nice, expensive ones. You know, you've got the tie and the cuffed shirt, and but a lot of guys really like wearing suits, you know? But how, like, why, you know? I think a lot of the reason these guys like wearing the suits is because it makes them feel masculine. But in the absence of the expectation that they adhere to that, because you get built up to that. When you're a little kid, you see your dad in a suit from time to time, sometimes all the time, and you think, you know, yeah, well, this is what a man looks like, and you grow up thinking that, and you're as much affirming the archetype as you are experiencing and expressing personal enjoyment. So I have no idea how you detach those things necessarily. You know what I mean? Does my expensive computer make me happy sincerely, or do I like the gamer lights? I don't know. I have no idea. When it comes to moving forward, though, with like the ability to suitably reward and affirm people's behaviors when they, I guess when they do things that are kind of aligned with gender expectation, maybe it's better to focus on more like neutral qualities, I guess. And now, obviously, like, you know, if like a trans woman dresses up to the nines and comes up to you and they're like, you know, how do I look? And you're like, you look very gender neutrally good. That's probably not. I mean, you know, obviously, yeah. Use a brain. You know, that's not always the 100% best approach. But I think that generally speaking, like, we even do this with our kids too. You know what I mean? Like with like little girls and boys, like the way we compliment them is so like partial and specific. You can listen to a parent's soundbite, like listen to them talk for 10 seconds and know if they're talking to a son or daughter. A little weird, especially since 99% of the time they're talking about stuff that has nothing to do with gender. You did a good job climbing that tree. I mean, everyone climbs trees, at least until they turn 13 and their bones creak, and then they stop, you know. Just focusing on stuff like that, you know, or like, yeah, handsome for boys, pretty for girls. Who decided that one? I don't fucking, don't they mean the same thing? They mean the same thing, but we just choose. It's like a pink word and a blue word. If we can move off stuff like that, generally, I think that the times we do apply it will be more meaningful, and the times we don't will be more authentic.
Thank you so much, Bosch. We're now going to throw it to Malcolm.
So I still don't know what flyleaf, firefly, whatever the fuck you guys are talking about.
Firefly! It's a beloved, like, mid-2000s, like, sci-fi show.
I'll look it up.
I'll look it up. Later,
I'll look it
okay?
up. I'll look it up.
Like, what was...
There's only one season. What are you guys talking about?
Hold up, bro. It's not good.
No.
There's only one season. What are you talking about, Hans? There's one season. What?
It's a total ripoff of Star Wars. People
he's
just gas
twitching
it
his
up
pecs.
because they're.
He's twitching his pecs. He's angry.
Listen, leave him alone.
I'm gonna lose
I'll
my
watch
shit.
it. I'll watch it.
That's
I'll watch
enough.
it.
You're
Scumfuck,
5
you
seconds
just
of
have
your
to let
speaking
me,
time, Malcolm.
okay?
Look, let me assert my masculinity. I'll watch Firefly. I'm so fucking sorry.
All you need to know is that it was directed by and written by Joss Whedon. Okay, I'm just saying. That's all you need to know about it.
We'll just try it. Okay, I will try it. I swear, I'm
Josh
so sorry.
Joss Whedon did Buffy, right?
So I think that Vosh is right. Like that part of what we can do is kind of like using more neutral language, like kind of progressing this idea of making people more comfortable. But I think something that like kind of complicates
Joss
this
Whedon?
discourse is that especially when we're talking about trans people, a lot of our experiences are like really personal and they're really intimate and they're really like contingent on, and I don't mean this in like we transition for social validation, but that social validation does mean a lot to a lot of trans people. So I think that something that can be helpful is just being mindful of like how other people like to be affirmed as well, or even just like it's super cringe, like super sorry, like Fivehead, like asking people like, are you comfortable with like me using these words for you, or like things like that. I think that this is an important topic, but it's really hard to talk about
Contentious
because
subject.
everybody feels validated in different ways. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. Lumi, sorry, I was looking at something else because I just I love ignoring Jack. But who raised your hand first, Lumi or a Jack? Just like to be.
This is, I think I did, but and it's really quick. I was gonna say, I think you're totally on point, and this is typically what I talk about. And one small hint, it's not gonna be 100% on, but sometimes you can pay attention by just the way the person talks, what they value, what they like. You'll hear me say cozy like 30 times a day. You come up and you go, you look cozy today. I'm gonna be like, oh my God, thank you. I try so hard. Like, and then give me a cookie and we'll be good. And I think it really goes along with that. Also, I love the word stellar. I love stars. I love things associated with that. So, and it doesn't have to be gender based. I think we do this to a certain degree. We pay attention to the people we care about, the words they like. And try to go that direction.
Thank you so much, Lumi. Jack, you're unmuted. I never muted you, but I wanted you to know that I could have. I did that for you. All right, go.
You're free for now, friend.
First of all, the worst episode of Firefly is where they get kidnapped by space hillbillies. Second off, Lumi, you look very cozy today. Third of all,
Thank you.
I think
Nobody
that
compliments me in the way I
one
want to
of
be
one of
complimented.
the maybe overlooked areas that we could do better on is when it comes to narratives. I'm a firm believer,
Nice
always
cock,
have
Ian.
been, in
Thank
the
you.
power of stories and what stories communicate to us, much like the beloved television show Firefly. But I have an anecdote from.
I'm joking. I get told I have a
I'm an
nice
aunt.
cock all the
You know,
time.
I have three nibblings, which is the non-gendered word
Hate that.
for nieces, nephews, etc.
Hate that, by the
And
way.
nibblings is adorable. We should all use it more.
No.
And
It does sound like a slur,
my
yeah.
two of my nibblings were watching the movie Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind, and they were like 6 years old. I was showing it to them for the first time, and they turned to me and they were like, "Wait!" It was like halfway through the movie. They were like, "Wait, is that a girl? That can't be a girl. Girls can't be like
Poggers.
protagonists. Like, can't be heroes." And, like, they literally refused to believe that the main character of Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind was a girl, because they were not used to seeing girls in media doing adventure-y things like flying sky planes or whatever they call their flying machines in that movie. And it's just it is incredible. They were like 6 years old at the time. It's incredible how young kids start ingesting the gendered expectations of modern society. So, like, when it comes to, like,
Oh, I have a thought.
this is why conservatives are kind of on point when they're like, Gonzarella is like a threat to the patriarchy. It's like, well, it's a stupid thing for them to be upset about, but they are right that is educating kids that non-binary people exist, right? Like, but that's a good thing. They're just objectively against good things happening. That's basically my point. But narrative is a really, really important educational tool.
Can I jump in? Really quick thought after that?
Yeah, of course.
I think it's funny that you said that you 6-year-olds couldn't believe a girl would be the protagonist of a story, which I think is interesting because to me it feels almost like, albeit at different ages and different contexts, a mere opposite of when, and I've seen this so many times online and in person, a guy is disbelieving that a person who they find attractive in a show is a guy instead of a woman, you know? Like there'll be some like cute androgynous kind of, and you're like, that's a guy? That's a guy? And to me, it's almost a mirror of that, in the same way some people, I mean, even from an early age, have difficulty imagining the narrative centering of a girl. A lot of guys later couldn't imagine, like, the attractive centering of a guy, you know? That, like, it gets to the point where people are like, disbelieving of yeah, this could be an anime thing, too, I don't know. But disbelieving of reality. Like, it's insane how, like, massively our expectations contort to this. There are some things, like, we've made a joke of this, you know, like, girls don't pee. Now, if you want to get all, like, psychological about that, the fact that this is a prominent enough sentiment to have warranted a meme says a lot of really weird stuff, that half the population is in some way expected less to participate in a universal, not just humans, not just mammals, universal across all animal species, biological act. They do this, yeah, the girls don't poop thing, and of course it's a joke, but, like, 50-50? Because, like, it's like 50-50 a joke, right? Because there are a lot of guys who legitimately do get kind of taken aback by any forward acknowledgement of women using the restroom. Like, it's like it's 70-30 a joke. That's very strange. That's completely socially constructed. You know, ye back in the tribal humans of yore, everyone was shitting in bushes. I sincerely doubt they were any more weird about it with regards to gender or sex back then.
Just real quick on top of that, just kind of you brought up that example. When I was growing up, I like learned that trans people existed from like daytime television shows where like for those of you who are too young to remember Maury had did more than just like have segments on television of like you are not the father. Like he did more than that. They were also special episodes where they would bring a bunch of models on stage, like femme models.
Oh no.
And then the audience would have to guess which one was trans, and like it was basically like then everyone would like lose their shit when they found out which one was the trans woman, because like their expectation was like, oh, trans women are like jokes, they're not real, they can't possibly look attractive to me. And so like yeah, that the expectations we have in
What if that was a
society
way to
are
come
really
out?
weird.
They do the whole game show, and
that.
at the end they're like,
Thank you.
"Where's the
Thank you
trans
so much,
woman?"
Jack.
And
All
then
right,
Mari steps up
Bluebird,
on the stage.
Had their hand raised, so we're gonna go to them.
This is my
And
coming
then just
out.
reminding everyone, we have about 8 minutes left on this topic before we go to closers.
That'd be
and then
base
take our break
as
before we
fuck.
go into the final discussion. Then Bluebird, just a quick note.
Yeah.
Hand up higher. I wasn't sure like if you were like scratching like your chin or something. I was like, what? You got a big? It's like, hey, here are my hands. Give every time.
I
need
learned
at least
about
a little
trans
bit of this,
women
all
through
right?
porn.
Go ahead, Bluebird.
I'm sorry. Don't get mad at
I'll
me.
be on this side and then I'll put my hand over here next time. Yeah. All right. So, like, I don't know if this is entirely related to what Vaush or Vosh was saying. Like, I don't, I don't know if it's entirely similar, but like, in the sense of like the Marina and the Diamonds video, How to Be a Heartbreaker. I don't know if any of you have seen that music video, but essentially it's like, you know how in most music videos there's like the main guy who is a singer, and there's lots of like half naked girls behind him, like at a swimming pool, and they're all in like their bikinis and stuff. If you've seen the Marina and the Diamonds How to Be a Heartbreaker thing, there's like this music video scene where there's like 6 or 7 guys who are just wearing Speedos. It's like full thighs on show and everything, but it's like they're dressed in a similar sexual manner to how the girls are. I found, like, in my entirely anecdotal evidence, admittedly, if you show a bunch of guys that music video, they get extremely uncomfortable. Like, whereas if you get the same thing and you show a bunch of guys that literally any other music video where there's girls half naked, they see that as normal. So it's like, I just thought it was interesting
Lil
that
Nas X.
dichotomy is there not only in like the protagonist in like shows, but also in like music videos, you know.
If I can,
It
like,
does. I even
Sorry. Who was that?
Lumi can go ahead. It's okay.
Denims. No,
What?
Denims. You haven't spoke.
Okay. Denims.
I will fight you over this.
Denims,
Okay, I'll be short.
and then Luby.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen the Marina and the Diamonds video. Yeah, it was like, honestly, when I remember seeing that when I was like a teenager, and I was like, whoa, it's so cool. And like, it's crazy how much that media representation, it's always such a weird thing when conservatives like to say that like media representation doesn't matter. It's always like the most bizarre thing, because I grew up on like a lot of American cartoons, and I think when I was really young I watched My Teenage Life as like a Robot. So like I had at least like some nice.
I like that show.
Yeah,
It's
it's
a good
it's
show.
so, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's so good. But I got to see a lot of cartoons that had female protagonists, so it was never like, I luckily didn't have like the experience of like, whoa, female protagonist, whoa, cool. But also like, I have to say, the worst thing in the
Wacky.
world is when you point out to someone that like female characters are written poorly in a show or a movie, and then they're like, no, they're not. And it's like, wait, yes, they have no motivations, they have no goals, they're only there to help the main character.
Just like
what are
real
you
women.
like, the show is
Rug.
still good, the plot is great, and the male characters are all good, but the female characters just are, you know, they're not there for anything except to help the main character. And it's so frustrating because like unnecessary garbage about the characters, just like if you just wrote the characters well, it would be an amazing show. But like, because most of the media is dominated by like male directors and shit like that, like people just don't care. But
yeah, it's almost as if that's like the point of it. Like they see that those female characters aren't quote well written, but like that's also how they're written, and that's how it like upholds the whole gender thing, you know.
Yeah.
I don't
We're
think
gonna
it's. Oh, I don't think it's
Yeah, of course.
malicious. I think a lot of people
True, yeah.
honestly can't think outside that box. If anything, that's like more worrying, right? That you have,
exactly.
down to antiquity, like centuries and centuries of literature and stuff, and I know that they're written by men, but like the persistent inability to write a good female character from so many of these authors is really extraordinary. I mean, the idea that you'd think at the simplest point, right? You would like this is 101. Like write a person.
Yeah.
They're a woman. Okay, there's person. If you really need to, you can write a guy and then just necessary alterations per context and historical time period. But even that's rare. Usually, it's like the most
boobs.
or like they wear a cute dress. You change the part about the cool suit to the cool dress. I don't know, minimal. But that often doesn't happen either. Usually, the women characters are relegated to really superficial roles. So I think it speaks to a lacking, like a artistic dearth that we have in our chests. That's been such a consistent problem.
Yeah, and like you say, I don't think that's really malicious. I think that's just passed down generationally. Like we can do all the introspection and internal cleaning that we want, but we're still using like this dirty brush that we've had for years. All
right, we're gonna throw it to yeah, no, it's absolutely okay, Bluebird. We're gonna throw it to Lumi and then Jack, and then that's all the time we have. But like, big meme. Like, it was like quote from like George R.R. Martin, where it's like, "How do you write women so well?" He's like, "I consider women to be people," and it was just like, oh no,
yes.
Like, go ahead, Lumi.
That quote is exactly. I'm so glad you knew the author because I kept like thinking of that. But I think that we see. I heavily agree that it's not malicious. And I think I experienced that a lot just as a non-binary people or not a non-binary people. The they them pronouns truly are plural. I'm just here to acknowledge that. But no, I think it's the recognition that a lot of people are still trying to kind of sort which direction they go with that. And we don't even have there's a confusion. And it's funny because I don't even get upset about this because I'm struggling with that too. And so it's a struggle of finding someone that's like, hey, let's explore this together. Let's move forward together. Let's communicate about this and recognize that sometimes we're both running into like internalized sexism that we didn't even realize was there until we watched that Lil Nas Industry baby video and we're like, oh my gosh, sexy dudes. I'm not used to seeing sexy dudes. What the fuck? And then we see that little checked internalized sexism, those internalized roles, that it's not malicious. We see it on the left. We see it with non-binary people. We see it with everyone. And that's just kind of like our gender socialization as a whole. Modern gender roles, they're doing a number.
Thank you.
They do.
Well, thank you so much. Yep, we're going to go to Jack, and then we're going to go into closing statements for this topic. So go ahead, Jack.
So a lot of people who have a lot of investment in the binary will typically, when you bring up issues like this, they'll talk about like, oh, well, what does it matter to me anyway? Like, I'm a man, like feminism doesn't have anything to do with me, like how does this affect my life? And often this comes from an imperfect understanding that feminism is for everybody, not just women, but also because they don't necessarily see how these ideas affect them in their day-to-day lives, right? But all this talk about like Hollywood and the writing of women is a really great example, right? Like our sexism, our gendered expectations, our gendered performance.
If it weren't for feminism, we wouldn't be having a muscle girl renaissance.
I think I said that right. All of those things keep us from experiencing media where all of our characters are interesting people, right? Like it makes our media worse to have fewer well-written characters in it. Why wouldn't you want your TV shows, your movies, your anime to have, or your video games, if you're a gamer, to have well-written characters that are both men and women? Like we're missing out on like 50% of the characters ideally in our media. So like that's tangibly hurting your experience with culture as a whole by propping up these systems that diminish women and NB folks,
Thank you so much, Jack. All right. Excellent discussion. We're going to move to closing statements for this. We're going to start with Vosh, and then go back the opposite way which we came, which is Bluebird, Malcolm, Denims, Lumi, and finishing with Jack. So, V, 75 seconds on the clock. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, so as I've always said, I think what a lot of people, like guys who don't think feminism is for them, don't appreciate is that the muscle girl renaissance we're experiencing right now is actually a product of feminism. The ability to develop attractions to atypically or non-feminine women is entirely based around the expansion of women's roles and gendered expectations that have taken place over the past 50 years. So right now, 4chan is simultaneously full of people posting hentai images of women with rippling muscular six-packs and denouncing feminism. And I say to you, do you not know the hand you bite, my friend? Your drinking right now has trickled down the great mountain that is feminism. You fool.
Thank you.
True.
Thank you, Vosh. I love feminism because I love muscly ladies. We're gonna throw it to Bluebird.
I knew that one would play well.
If gender's a performance, then I've just been booed off the stage. So essentially just gender is, if like gender performativity kind of sucks, it's not the be all end all of like gender, because like, but it's at least a little bit better in my opinion than the whole like, what is it, the whole like gender essentialist type trope that TERFs like to push, like, you know. Yeah
Thank you so much, Bluebird. All right, Malcolm.
I like this topic a lot. I think Lumi brought up a really good point earlier about just kind of like mirroring language. So like just being able to be mindful of like the kind of language that people use towards themselves, and then just kind of mimic that. That way we can kind of safely get away from like gendered reinforcement or like language, while still like validating and honoring trans people whose genders are like rooted in the valuing of themselves with like masculine or feminine language, or like, you know, like masculine compliments, like things like that. Like I said earlier, I think that this is kind of like a difficult topic to navigate just because like gender is like really personal to a lot of people. But I definitely think that Lumi had like the best solution, where it's like mirroring language. I honestly never even thought of that, but I think that's a really good neutral way. That way, because like I don't know about anybody else on here. If
No,
somebody's
Mr.
like, "Hey, are you
Butterfingers,
okay
it's
if I
not a
call you
debate.
sir?" and I'm just like, fuck you. Like, obviously, like, I get really frustrated with that kind of stuff because I feel like people are clocking me and that makes me uncomfortable. So I think a really safe, like, neutral ground is just kind of like mirroring people's language, like noticing how they talk about themselves in like the third person or whatever. That way we can kind of just like skirt around that.
Meet the guy so
Validate people,
woke,
but also
he'll
don't push
walk
like
up to
gender,
trans
like,
women
performativity on
and
them,
ask
or
if
like
they're
gender language
comfortable
on them
being
if that's something they're
referred
comfortable with.
to as
Thank
she,
you so
her.
much, Malcolm. All right, Denims.
Yeah, I wanted to bounce back on some of the
Chad
things that were said
behavior.
before me. Definitely, like the mirroring thing is like huge. Like I have like kind of started making it or like making an effort to refer to people in the most gender neutral way until I figure out more without putting someone on the spot, especially in like a public space where like you don't necessarily want to make someone uncomfortable in a group of people for no reason, right? So like saying like they instead of like he or she when like talking about someone that you're not sure about is like, in my experience or from what I've heard from other people, is like pretty safe bet, because you allow the person to say like correct you or whatever, and you give them the space to do that. And then also with regard to like the muscly women thing, like it's great. Like I don't understand. Well, like wife goals and also life goals for starters on muscly women, but more so on like the performativity aspect of gender roles. It's just so stupid. Like the amount of men, I did like a poll recently, and like the amount of men that have been told or like assigned male at birth have been told like unnecessarily like, oh, by the way, you know, like you shouldn't cry, or implicitly said you shouldn't cry because it's not manly to do that or whatever. It's just, it was like, I think that the poll was like 85% of AMAB were like have received this, which is the most like sad thing I've ever heard in the world, because it's just not necessary. And people who are like, and specifically I guess like men who are like against feminism or whatever, don't realize that like feminism is giving you like an alternative. Removing these gender roles is giving you an alternative to this. Like having emotions is just a human being thing. You shouldn't feel like the need to stifle it because of some stupid roles. I yield my time.
Absolutely. I've cried on stream, including right after talking to Vosh, because I was really happy. Lumi, go ahead.
That's cute.
Fuck, I was just enjoying that whole conversation. No, in terms of gender performativity, I definitely think that going back to how feminism is pushing us to free everyone from having to engage in that gender performativity, that's very prescriptive. It's that weird sense of when I have guys come in and I'm talking about men's liberation, they're like, well, I don't need liberated. I'm happy in this role. And that's fine. If that's something you enjoy for yourself, first off, I question if you really fully enjoy it. Are you enjoying those moments where you're getting checked on dates of whether you're manly enough, or when you're having to feel like you have to engage in masculinity to show you're tough or you're the dominant guy in the room or whatever the case may be? That's again, like, pulling you away from that pressure. And I think we just want that for everyone. That'll heal so much in terms of just weird, awkward gender relations where dudes have to go and be very assertive all the time. Like, ones in all chats that ever exist, if you're a dude, and you would just love if a lady would come up to you and be like, hey, and make that first move. And not always have to be in that position. I really think that's freeing up our current modern gender roles and moving forward towards where we're not having to perform these goofy gender roles, and it makes it better for everyone.
Goofy goober.
So much, Lumi. All right, last word on this topic. Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like the muscle mommy discourse goes, look, men, free yourselves from the expectation that women have to be thin and waifish, and you will live happier, more fulfilling lives as your feminine partner benches you, okay? And like just punches out dents in your car with her fists, okay? Also, alt-righters, you should care about these issues too, because they affect you. We've all been on your message boards for content in the content mines. We know about the femboys, okay? Femboys are valid, and gender abolition, eliminating the prescriptivist notion of gender, would maximize the amount of femboys that you are able to enjoy in your day-to-day lives, okay? So join us in the project of gender liberation.
Thank you so much.
Why are you a
Jack.
feminist, sir?
So
I want my
Nazi
ethno state to have more
This has
femboys.
probably been like the most productive or like a wholesome panel that I've had in like literally forever. So thank you all so much for that. We are now going to take a brief 5-minute break before topic 3. If you need to get water, use the bathroom. I'm gonna crack open a beer, and then we will see where we go for topic number 3. Meet back here at 9:40. Feel free to do whatever you want, just to make sure we keep this on schedule. I know other people have other things like to do and stuff, so trying to respect everyone's time. So we are going to go to topic 3. Yeah, Bluebird is a Brit bonger, and they are fighting against the clock and night and day itself to be here with us. So we got to make sure we're respecting everyone's time. So
I've been doing that since before you guys were born.
How old?
I'm 21. I wasn't alive, but
you know what we need to balance things out. I know
finally a panelist who's younger than me. Holy
I know we
shit,
have
thank
3 head
God.
for the Brits. We need something for the
baby.
French,
Like,
for French and
all right,
French Canadians. You know,
stop it.
something horrifically insulting.
Still a fucking baby.
True.
Stop it. No. Anyway,
Yeah,
performatively
like a
being
two-head.
sad right now. All right, neo-pronouns are new constructs gaining ground in trans and trans-allied spaces, and some cis spaces as well. Should we embrace this new development, or is the lack of universality does the lack of universality make them useless in their intended function?
Do I shut up and avoid drama, or do I actually
try to? You can take this you can take it linguistically, you can take it like any number of ways. So I'm gonna do like the random spot thingamajiggers really quick, throw people around, see where everyone lands up in regards to the opening statement stuff. All right. We are going to start with Bluebird, and then Jack, then Vosh, then Denims, then Lumi, and then Malcolm, and then going in the reverse order. So, 75 seconds on the clock.
First off,
Like, I think the concept of like universality is an entirely useless concept to base your language around, you know?
Oh no.
Like, we're all like, we're moderately public content creators, right? Like, we know that words carry weight that's unique to every word and every person. Like, language is already not very universal. It's this externalization of an internalized process of called thought, and we have to internalize other people's processes, and there's like a lot of like gray area there, you know? Like, we're having this conversation, and again, we're having this conversation, but if you picked up a normal person off the street, they wouldn't understand what the heck we're talking about. Like, gender abolitionism, performativity theory, like, we all like to forget like how terminally online we are when we say stuff like this, but it's true. Like, we got to embrace it. You know, like, also we're all talking like one single language, English, that about like 80% of the world doesn't speak. In Spanish, they have the gender at the end of adjectives. Like, I have a whole bunch of opinions about pronouns becoming so widespread in discourse that I've voiced elsewhere.
Well, if
But
language
I'll
is
save you all the
subjective,
trouble of that
why can't I
until it
say the
becomes
N-word?
relevant in the conversation.
No, stop.
Thank
That
you
was a
so
joke.
much,
No.
Bluebird. All right, Jack.
The concept that neo-pronouns are new is a pretty common misconception.
True.
The English language changes all the time, and that's been true for like the last 1,000 years that it's existed. Like, I mean, you can look back at the 1800s. The 1800s, they were throwing new pronouns at the wall like every other day. Okay, like for a while, there was a new pronoun called thon. And like that made it into the dictionary in like the 1920s, 1930s. Like, so when we're talking about this neo-pronoun discourse, it's largely just rehashing the same conversation we've been having about language since like the dawn of time, which is like new word, unfamiliar, bad. And frankly, like, sure, we feel that way about a lot of words. But what really determines whether or not a word gets used or not tends to be like how useful it is in average everyday conversation. Neo-pronouns in general, I don't have any problem with them. Like, if you want to identify using neo-pronouns, that's totally fine. I'll respect them. It's just like that's just polite. But like, whether they catch on or not is another question entirely. So yeah, no problem with them. That's just how language works.
Yeah. Could I also add just a very quick small?
Wait, 1 second. I'll let you go first after opening statements. We'll just get through these before we go into. No problem. How dare you! I will silence every fucking person on this panel.
Wow, I'm sorry. I read the rules in the Discord.
Fight me.
It's like, all right. Okay,
Liar.
I'm joking. It's fine.
all right, go ahead, Vosh.
So I guess this is something that I'm not a full convert on. Maybe I just haven't heard the right arguments. If a person has neo-pronouns, I'll respect them. I don't have anything against that. I don't think there's anything wrong with using neo-pronouns. I don't think that some words are right and some words are wrong. I'm not a linguistic prescriptivist. All those things I stand by. The only thing that I guess I find a bit odd is that hyper-personalized neo-pronouns sound closer to a grammatically unique nickname to me. Because pronouns, I mean, in the English language, we have like 3 or 4 that are used commonly. If new ones are added, like Z or Zer, I think that's lovely. Go for it. I don't know what those would pertain to necessarily, but yeah, go for it. When it comes to some hyper-individualized ones, which you can see if you go on the right parts of the internet, or the wrong ones, depending on your opinions of it, it just seems like a nickname. Because a pronoun is meant to convey, like, a pronoun is something that you say about a person before you know anything about them. Or at least that's how I think it should be. There is some general utility to the universality of pronouns. Now, we obviously don't always adhere to that. I mean, for God's sake, we gender boats, but I think there's some worth to that. When it comes to, like, some of the hyper-specific Azir self, you can go find whatever, you know. If you ask for it, I'll respect it. I don't care. There's nothing wrong with it. It just seems like more of a nickname, you know? A nickname meant to describe some element of your character you want respected, which is how nicknames work. So, I don't know. Maybe I need to hear the right arguments, maybe.
Thank you, Vosh. And yeah. And I appreciate the skepticism. Hopefully that will make this conversation very productive. So thank you very much for that. All right, Denims, go ahead.
So I have to agree with, at the very least, the former part, which is like, I'm I just don't want to be an asshole. So anytime anyone tells me to follow any specific pronouns or a name or whatever, I'm always going to comply, and because I just don't want to be an asshole to someone, and it costs literally $0 to be nice. Okay, so in general, I follow this opinion. The part where I get like, I guess, like a little bit hesitant is that like conservatives have been very good at making a big deal of pronouns for absolutely no fucking reason at all. And I think every time conservatives see new pronouns, they freak out and it looks really bad, optically sweaty. And that's my only concern with it at all. My only concern with it at all is that it gets used to further push conservative, oh my God, those wacko liberals are coming up with more genders kind of shit. Beyond that, I think like, you know, if you want to, it's my take on it is very similar to like when the pride flag started to include the brown and black stripes in it.
Oh,
And
right.
initially I was like in like a teenager. So initially when it came out, I was like, oh, like, is this necessary? Is this like, like, I feel like the pride flag is good enough on its own. But then like after a certain amount, it's like, people like it. It includes, and it talks about it, like the brown and black stripes, as far as I understand, are specifically for inclusivity in gay spaces for these people. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm fine with it. And that's about my take on neo-pronouns.
Thank you, Denims. Lumi.
True me.
Rice cake.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, all right. It's okay.
Oh, no. I'm good. I actually originally almost went with neo-pronouns, but then I felt like people were going to struggle enough with they, them pronouns, and I was going to deal with that issue, which kind of sucks. So here I am with my they, them pronouns. I also felt like it was going to be a little too far for some people, and it's a lot to fight for just the they, them pronouns for me personally. With that being said, I think that neo-pronouns, I understand why people go for them. Not that it matters to me. I appreciate what Denims and Vosh are getting at in terms of just, okay, I'm going to respect that and I'm going to follow through on that, even though I don't necessarily understand it, because I don't think you have to fully understand someone and what they're doing to recognize they're not doing damage, and it's a matter of respect. Now, with that being said, I think people with neo-pronouns are doing what non-binary and other non-gender non-conforming or exploring people do. They're being creative, and I love that, and I'm there for that for them. And I think it shakes up and makes people, or can make people, think a little bit more about what is in pronouns. We get that conversation regularly in my stream where people are like, well, why do they want these pronouns? And we talked about why I wanted fair pronouns at the beginning of this conversation. And it goes into how, you know, they, them pronouns can feel very ambiguous because we use them for when we don't know someone's gender, or when there's multiple genders, where she or he can feel like they have a lot of personality to them because of the gendered cultures. And so I think it's creative, new ways of trans people and other gender exploratory people conceptualizing themselves, and I think that's based.
Thank you so much, Lumi. All right. Malcolm, and then as Malcolm is going, anyone who wants to raise their hand to start off the general conversation, start raising them hands. I see you, Jack. Anyone else is welcome while he's speaking. Go ahead, Malcolm.
So I wrote down a few things. Just kind of like thoughts as everybody was talking. My first point is just general. Like, I think that a lot of the people that use noun, self, or neo-pronouns are usually just like kids on TikTok. Like mostly, right? There are still people that use these pronouns. I think it's like a pretty niche kind of conversation to have within like trans discourse. I don't think there's that many people that will use neo or noun self pronouns, and within that, people that use neo or noun self pronouns usually have like an alternative set of pronouns to use, like they them, if somebody like doesn't understand them or like can't use them for like language barriers, like things like that. So I think the idea of like there's like no utility, and like people, I think it was Dennis who brought up the idea of like conservatives kind of weaponizing this against us. A lot of these people almost always have like that exception where they're like, I'm fine with using they them if you don't want to use them for me or whatever. Neopronouns also aren't new, is another thing that I wrote down. Jack brought that up as well. Language is kind of fluid and made up. Like a year ago, if somebody said that's poggers, I would have been like, are you like smoking crack right now? Like, what does that even mean? And now that's like pretty common vernacular. So language is changing all the time. We're constantly adopting new ways to like express our feelings and like talk to each other and things like that. And then I really just wanted to like drive this in. And this is something that I talk about a lot, is the idea that like trans people, like we need to like kind of put ourselves in like a neat little box so that other people accept us. A lot of the things that we do as trans people are for like internal validation to like feel secure and like feel good about our gender and how we like explain ourselves and understand ourselves and identify ourselves. Conservatives will always hate us. If every single trans person in America was literally Blair White, every single one of us, conservatives still would not like us because we are other and we are different. So kind of placating the needs or like the demands of people that are like looking or seeking to oppress us will get us nowhere as far as trans liberation is concerned, or like integrating into like cis society. Like fuck that, like fuck placating people that are trying to oppress us or like dictate how we express our gender or ourselves. And that wasn't like, I'm not trying to like talk shit to you, Dennis. Just the point. I'm not saying fuck you. I just wanted
Denims, by the way.
Denims, I'm so sorry. I'm actually illiterate. It's because my second X chromosome actually prohibits me from reading, so I'm sorry.
It's okay. You're completely fine. You're completely fine.
All right, thank you, Malcolm. Our current list is Bluebird and then into Jack. Again, there seems to be at least if not disagreement, some mild skepticism. I'd like to just remind everybody as we go into this topic that we're all allies, we're all friends here. So let's let's try and proceed with as good faith as possible while we're going through these topics and hashing out any potential disagreements as we go. So with that in mind, 2 minutes on the clock. Go ahead, Bluebird.
Howdy. Jack, I just want to say, yeah, you are absolutely 100% correct. I agree with you. So true, bestie. Neopronouns are not new. Like thy, thou, and thine are like old neopronouns almost, but they're just not gendered. So they came into fruition easily. It's also really interesting that words come into fruition through significantly more social pressure when they're progressive, anti-racist, or queer, for example. Like saying like black people rather than like Negroes or something. It was like a lot more like it came through a lot more pressure, and then changing that to like POC or people of color, etc. That just came like that had to be fought for a lot, you know. And the same thing with the word queer, you know, same thing, you know. And for Vosh, like in response to the thing like about pronouns, but like neopronouns becoming just like grammaticalized nicknames, like not trying to like smack talk you or anything, but like all pronouns are just grammaticalized nicknames, like nicknames. We use them in place of our names in conversation. Like Vosh is on Vosh's stream talking to Hanz of Harkir and Hanz of Harkir's audience. Like that's the strictly grammatically correct way, but we use he, him, his as almost nicknames in the same way, almost, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we're gonna allow both Denims and Vosh to briefly like respond. Oh, sorry, wait, Denims wasn't added. Oh, sorry, Vosh was. So Vosh, Dennis, sorry, yeah. So Vosh, you're welcome to respond, and I'll give you both about 3 to 4 minutes to have like a brief back and forth. Everyone else, just please try and respect that time. Vosh, go ahead, and then Bluebird, just like take away, you two. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think that because nicknames tend to be personalized, you know, we don't have 2 or 3 or 4 nicknames. We have an infinite number. There are probably more nicknames potentially than there are regular names, because names at least adhere to a convention, and nicknames can just be anything. I don't know. Again, I'm not a linguistic prescriptivist. I don't think there's like a right or a wrong this or that. To me, it's just there are certain types of words or certain elements of grammar that we personalize, and some we do less so. Pronouns historically aren't really personalized. There aren't that many, and they're usually distinct and blocked out in very large and known groups. Whereas there are others that are more, like some adjectives, for example, are much more personalized and used in some specific circles. So I guess my hope had always been with the neopronoun thing is that language would get easier with this, you know? Like masculinity and femininity and gender in general have complicated language in a number of ways, and I guess I'd always hoped that things would get more more streamlined with time. But I worry that, I mean, if pronouns fall to the nickname like role, then what if adjectives do as well, you know, where using some adjectives for some people is considered offensive or not, stuff like that. I don't know. It just feels like it could be a little weird. Like maybe we could go in a different direction. I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose, but at the same time, I feel like on specifically the adjective thing, it's like we're sort of kind of like doing like the basics of that now, like with pretty or handsome or cute. Like these are like gendered words almost, you know. Like I feel like that's something to be brought up. Like I'm not coming here to say, oh, you're wrong or anything. I'm just bringing this up as like interesting like thought places to like jump off of in terms of conversation, you know, like.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think the conversation is worthwhile. Though the gendered language is to group blocks, right? I mean, not to individuals. So it's not so much nicknamey as it is like adhering to the broader grouping of existing pronouns.
Yeah, that's fair. I think we can leave this here and let other people talk.
Very, very cool, and I appreciate everyone back. Normally, there's more of those because people like start picking fights. But that's like normally how like an individual, like if you have like a specific question for somebody else, you're welcome to do that. Like raise your hand and ask one of those if you want to do that in the space of the conversation. So
such a civil panel.
Denims, I see you. We're gonna go to Jack, then Malcolm, and then to Denims. So everyone else, if you want to jump in, please raise your hand because now there is a list. So just try and be respectful of the people who are waiting to say something so we can keep the conversation flowing. So Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, so when we talk about utility in language, right, I think that over time, and again, like when we're talking about gender abolition as a concept, that's probably going to be something that will take 100, if not more years, right? Like probably I'm willing to wager on the more years side of that spectrum. And along the way, there's going to be a lot of experimentation when it comes to language, and what sticks and what doesn't is going to be sussed out over time as well, right? I imagine if we ever reached like a gender abolished society, there would probably just be like one generalized pronoun for everybody. What that might be,
the pronouns would be based on
maybe
height.
It'll just be they. Maybe it'll be Caesar. Who knows? But generally speaking, I think that the reaction to this is a reaction to people experimenting with their gender, right? Like, I can imagine if I were like an old fuddy-duddy who watches Fox News every day, hearing current discourse about neo-pronouns would be basically like somebody walking up to me and saying like, hello, my name is Mike, and I use gloop glop pronouns. Like that and that's not me belittling the argument. I'm just trying to express that's how it comes across to older people who are heavily invested in the gender binary, right? And so as we are decoupling sex and gender from each other, right, there is going to be more experimentation with language. There's going to be more experimentation with how we refer to each other in all of that. And I think that's perfectly natural and a direct result of the oppression that has been experienced, right? And so whether or not this is going to be useful on a long scale, who knows? I would wager probably not. We're probably going to whittle it down to like one generalized
guys, I have
generally utilized pronoun, and that
you know
will
how we
probably
constantly steal
how this goes.
black vernacular,
so just
like AAVE.
Keep all that in mind, I think, while we
like
discuss
all the
this.
time,
I
like
think
for a
that's useful.
century, we just keep
Thank you
stealing
so much,
more
Jack.
and more.
And
AAVE.
everyone, just in general, anything that like you say in terms of like language stuff, like try and make it as accessible for
what if everyone
people
in the
audience,
future is just
and
my word,
including myself, who are not as educated
it's not
on
even a
this
race
kind of
thing,
just to encourage not just inclusivity but like actual learning. I think this is like a really great conversation, and it would be really frustrating if like say half the people listening couldn't fucking understand because we're all dumb and we haven't read like these like specific authors. So
that could happen.
I'm doing my best, buddy. I'm so sorry. All right, we're gonna go.
One last thing. Some languages already have like one generalized pronoun. Like people in my chat are talking about how Turkish has onun as like the generalized pronoun. So like that's probably going to happen in English too. It's just going to be a longer time scale. Anyway, sorry.
Thank you so much, Jack. All right, we're gonna throw it to Malcolm and then Denims. Oh, sorry, Dennis, chat, stop confusing me. I'm dumb. Okay. All right. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Malcolm.
That was my fault that I'm
No,
illiterate. My
no, no,
bad.
no. I just want you to know you're completely fine. I find it really funny. I'm not like offended.
I
or
think that
hurt
you
in
should
any
change your
way.
handle to like Dennis the Menace. I think.
Yeah, I actually have it on my whiteboard or not my whiteboard. That it says Dennis the Menace on it.
I love
Obviously, the
that.
camera's too low quality right now, but yeah.
I love that. Okay. I'm sorry, Dennis. My bad. Okay. I just had a question for Vosh because I think it's kind of like interesting. Like, how would you justify the idea of like supporting the movement of gender abolitionism, or trying to like recreate like new ways for people to interact and like exist within, or like get rid of gender as we understand it now, but like be opposed to, or like I wouldn't say like opposed to, that sounds kind of aggressive, but like hesitant about like neo or noun self pronouns, as those are kind of like a gateway to that, where we're kind of like breaking apart at least the linguistic side of how we interpret gender in society.
You're welcome to have another like a 3 to 4 minute back and forth. Go ahead.
This might be a contentious opinion. I think they're actually pulling in opposite directions. Gender abolitionism is about delegitimizing the entire institution of gender, whereas creating new neo-pronouns and like new genders and stuff like that seems like it goes in the opposite direction, where it erects more walls. We need more social understanding to know what types of names and terms people go by and what kinds of respect or attitude we should assign to all of them. Now, to be clear, I don't think that's a bad thing for people to do. I don't think my broader ideas on gender abolitionism are some kind of like moral like edict that everyone must follow or be wrong. It just seems to me like when I think of the direction gender abolitionism would go in, it'd be more like de-emphasizing stuff rather than what I see in a lot of these circles, which is constantly talking about establishing new gender rules, just ones that we're not familiar with, you know? Like, I don't know, like, is a forum constantly dedicated to, like, creating new genders and pronouns to go along with it really deconstructing gender, or just building out, like, you know, like, building out the scaffolding, like, out into the distance in directions none of us could have expected? Again, I don't think it's wrong. I'm not coming at this from an opposed perspective. It's just
I didn't mean to like load the language like that. I was just kind of like paraphrasing.
That's just the feeling I get, I guess. I don't know.
So, like, one thing I would say is that, so like the idea of people creating multiple genders and multiple gender identities, like this is just kind of like a niche, like trans secular, I don't like secular is kind of a word, but it's like a niche trans thing where it's kind of like gender fuck, like the idea that you're kind of like making a mockery of like gender expression, gender roles, pronouns, like things like that. So when people are making like, I am like a white claw gender, they're usually just like making a mockery of like gender as a cheers. I'll cheers to that, bro.
Sorry for
they're usually just making like a mockery of like the system of gender itself. So like when you say that it's kind of like adding on to the presence of gender instead of like delegitimizing it or like breaking it down to move towards gender abolition, I would say that that's moving in the correct direction, because what we're doing is we're kind of like spitting in the face of like traditional understandings of gender and kind of breaking them down and like taking them back from like cisgender society and saying like, fuck you, I'm not going to go by like he, him, I'm going to go by like lamp self, and I identify as a lamp, like fuck off.
Yeah,
like it's kind of like pushing that in that direction.
And to be fair, I like the mockery. I do like it when people throw rocks at it, you know, I do enjoy that. But it can't be mockery and also sincere. So there's two directions on this. If it's mockery, that's great. But there are people who treat not using neo-pronouns the same way they would treat misgendering like a binary trans person, which I think can be legitimate. But sometimes, like, there are people who will be like, oh, well, I go by dream self, and if you don't call me by dream self, then that's the same as misgendering a trans person. That's transphobia right there. And that's not mockery. That's just what I consider to be kind of a silly extension of what already exists. So if it's in the mockery sense, I'm totally fine with it. Like whatever wacky stuff people want to come up with. But if it starts to get entrenched with the same degree of like gravitas that a lot of real social issues that aren't mockeries have, then that I guess is where I feel a little bit weird, you know?
Yeah.
Last word on this, and then we're gonna throw it to Denim. So just make sure don't have any more particular questions for Vosh, because we're gonna throw it to somebody else.
Got you. So like two things, like one, I think that part of this, so like I kind of brought this up in my opening statement, that a lot of people that will use neo or noun pronouns will also have like a caveat where they're like, okay, like I understand that not everybody likes to or wants to or can use like neo or noun pronouns. Maybe like English isn't their native language, like maybe they have like a learning disability, maybe they can't use these. So they're okay with like they, them, or like a binary quote unquote pronoun or things like that. I think that the problem is like the idea that people unironically will claim that not calling somebody like lamppost self is in the same vein of like actual legitimate transphobia. I think that's like pretty terminally online. I think that pretty much only exists in like, like TikTok or wherever the fuck else like the kids are doing crazy shit these days. And then the last thing that I want to say, because I think this is really important.
I just want to say I agree. I completely agree with that. Just to be quick, I agree with that.
Yeah, literally stay off of TikTok. Don't do it. It's horrible. Berries and cream is like haunting my dreams.
Oh,
I don't know
no,
what I did.
I want to get involved.
I don't know what to do about the berries and cream TikTok. It's so bad.
Thank
but
you for the warning.
be careful. Be careful. Once you start, you can't stop. So the last thing that I want to say, and this isn't like a jab at you, this is like a jab at like this kind of ideology as a whole, that like we as trans people cannot be sincere in ourselves while also mocking cis people. The idea of like gender fuck and like these like a lot of neo-pronouns and things like that are kind of meant to be like a mockery of like the attack helicopter joke, or people saying, or like weaponizing like, well, if you can identify as a woman, like I can identify as a chair. We can still be sincere in ourselves and our gender and like who we are and how we explain our gender to other people, and still like make fun of people that unironically think that people are out here being like, yeah, I identify as an Apache attack helicopter, you have to call me Colonel Self, otherwise you're a transphobe. I think that there's probably like 2 people in the entire world that like mean that sincerely, and the rest of it is just kind of like talking shit. But I think that you can do both. I think that you can be sincere to yourself and your identity, and also like push back against like cis people or like transphobia and shit like that.
Do you guys think it's
I called myself gender
reactionary of me to worry about
quick
those
aside,
TikTok kids?
I called myself gender void, and it was kind of a combination of both mockery of the concept of gender while also being deeply sincere. And that is exactly what gender feels to me. I almost think that these neo-pronouns are cracking that open and showing how the gendered pronouns. I'm sorry, I know we wanted to move on to denims, but it's
if all the people
the personality and pronouns, and I think it cracks that open a little bit. I understand your concerns about streamlining and not wanting 42 million different neo-pronouns or whatever the case may be, and all these niche ones and the intensity that it can be in. But I think, yeah.
I think really quickly too, if I could just pinch something in really quick. Binary people do this as well, and this is something that I do all the fucking time. People will unironically be like, "Well, you're a woman," and I'm like, "Absolutely! Like, aren't you straight? Do you want to go on a date?" Like, I can be sincere and true to like my identity as a man, and like identify as a man, and like live as a man, and people will still come at me sideways and be like, "Oh, well, you're a chick, whatever," and
literally
I'm like, "Well,
about the kids, Vosh. Holy
seems like
shit.
You're my type." Like, we can spit in the face of like these kind of institutions that like challenge us and question us and demean us, while still being true to ourselves. Like, I still go to bed every night, and I'm like, I'm a dude, like I'm happy with myself, blah blah blah. But if somebody's like, well, you're a woman, I'm like, and I'm the hottest one here, bitch. Like, get in line. You know, like we can do both.
Thank you, Malcolm, and thank you all, everyone, for that. I think that was a really great like piece. So we're gonna throw it now to Denims, and then Jack, and then to Blue Birds. Go ahead, Denim. Oh, sorry, Dennis.
Okay, yeah.
Like,
I was gonna say like really briefly about like just more of like the, I guess like the linguistics aspect of it. It feels like I don't know if you guys have heard of like the euphemism or dysphemism treadmills before, but it feels a lot like that, where like in the way that when Vosh was talking earlier about like adjectives, like we will have a word that describes something, and then it starts being used in a negative way until that word is sort of unusable, and we have to move on to a new word because this is just a really dumb thing that like language does. This is just the way that language works. And I think in the same way that sort of metaphoric treadmill would work is very similar to like my opinion of like the neo-pronouns, which is like this feels like just another progression of language as language has gotten more complicated and we've had more words and whatever, like, and it doesn't really make it doesn't seem like it's worth at all for any reason fighting, especially in the instance like Malcolm brought up like a really good point where he was talking about how a lot of the people who use neo-pronouns usually have some other backup pronouns just sort of stored away in the closet for when people don't want to adhere to their preferred pronouns, right? And I think it could be just very similar to that. Like we can have the extra words, and for people who don't, who don't want to or whatever, then like they can just use the ones that appeal to them, I guess. Ideally, we live in a world where, anyone would just get called whatever they want, but yeah.
Thank you, Denims. Just honing on that specific question for like further thought, if people want to respond to that after Jack and Bluebird finish, in terms of when you talk about, let's say, the optional second tier system where it's like, oh, like I prefer these pronouns, but like we have like backups in case. How do we feel about, say, like the potential like usefulness or viability of that? Thank you so much, Malcolm. I see you. You're on the list as well. So we're gonna go to Jack, then Bluebird, and then Malcolm. So go ahead, Jack.
I think Bosch had this interesting idea of people with neo-pronouns constructing new genders, and well, I do think that that's like somewhat what is happening. Like I 100% agree. Where I find the utility in that is in the broader sense of deconstructing the dominant gender ideology, right? Deconstructing that is something that needs to happen before we can even achieve gender abolition, right? And so while I agree, I also don't think that the gender identities of of people using neo-pronouns are going to be largely sustained, I guess. Like, no, I'm probably not phrasing this perfectly, so don't clip me. But
Flipped and shipped, Jack. Transphobic. We got her, folks. It was always the women. It's always the women. So go.
I think that in the long term, like I said, like long term, we're probably going to funnel this down to, utility to one pronoun that's applicable to everybody. And I don't think that like the dominant gender paradigm is going to be people who identify as like viver, or something like that. I don't see that happening. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe other people have different perspectives on this.
No,
I'd love to hear it.
Oh no.
I think the primary thing we need to worry about in this moment in time is deconstructing that dominant gender ideology, and then that's kind of like our main thing right now. And in the future, other people are going to take the ball and run with it.
All right, thank you, Jack. Vosh, you were briefly not added, but mentioned in regards to your initial idea. You're welcome to briefly respond to what Jack said, or if there's anything you want to add before we throw it to Bluebird and then Malcolm.
Okay, I'm gonna back up a step. Maybe I should be more clear. I don't have a problem with respecting people's identities or whatever. I hope people would accept that.
I hope I didn't imply that.
No,
one's applying
I
that.
read between the lines. I know what you said about me and my mother. No. I don't think I'm getting impute here. It's very difficult for me to articulate this because it's true. Most of what I'm complaining about is a super online problem. I see it. It's mostly 14-year-olds with Tumblr blogs. And while I'm not saying that elements of the trans experience are flippant things that children fly through like phases, there are certainly some things that certainly seem to attract more the attention of people still figuring out their identity. With all that being said, with regards to this, I'm not so much concerned with the language itself as it is the social weight behind the language, Now, I think misgendering a trans person is a pretty serious thing, There's a lot of stuff behind that. I'm totally okay with dedicating a portion of political capital to ensuring that not happens, or I guess to be more specific, to try my best to encourage people to behave in ways that keep that from happening. I think that's worth it. Now, you can expand that out to a certain degree, It's possible that, for example, the handsome, pretty discourse, those are gendered terms, and if you wanted to, you could expend political capital in making sure that people didn't call trans women handsome or trans men pretty. I don't know if that would be as worth the time, but it's theoretically something that you could, get up on a soapbox about. With some of the neo-pronoun stuff, my concern isn't what's happening now. My concern is the possibility that in 10 or 15 years, we might needlessly add to the range of things over which people get offended in a way which demands more political attention to defend. So if a bunch of people start adopting neo-pronouns and new genders and stuff, I don't really mind. But then 10 years down the line, they start writing op-ed articles and, professors in universities start saying that transphobia is the same whether it's against binary trans people or people who like want to be called Apache helicopters. Again, I don't think that's going to happen, but I think it's possible to look at some of the trends online and say, let's not make an aesthetic out of being overly gender fucky to the point where you create political problems in the future. Let's not extend the desire to challenge existing roles to the point where we only end up adding to the roles and thus to the political capital that we have to expend defending them. Because there's a big difference between expending political capital to help a group of people who are suffering and creating suffering and then expending political capital to defend people against that. What I just said can be interpreted in a wide range of charities. So I do hope that that's interpreted with the appropriate spirit and not in a very negative way. But I guess that's just something I worry about a little bit, you know?
Yeah, no, I get that too. Like, what is the harm of not gendering a lamp gender person the same as misgendering a a trans woman? You know, like are those two things equivalent? I don't know. Frankly, I've never met a lamp gender person who meant that like sincerely, I guess. And when we're, I guess, yeah, I guess what I'm concerned with right now, because I understand your argument to utility about when it comes to especially expending political capital, right? I just think that there is an extent to which that's a valid concern, and also
I'm trying so hard, guys. I hope you can appreciate that.
I'm not sure how to articulate what's in my brain right now. It's a complicated subject, for sure.
We can definitely come back to you, Jack, if you
yeah.
want to think about it for a bit, and then
That'd be great.
yeah, awesome. And then I appreciate Vosh saying that he'd be on the front lines of respecting pronouns and being the Canadian police that will throw Jordan Peterson in jail because I didn't do the pronouns correctly, so I have to throw. I will stop. Like whatever that bill was.
I would delight in seeing him arrested for misgendering. Absolutely.
We got him. He can practice the 12 rules in prison. We're gonna go to Bluebird and then
with the gender police,
and then Malcolm. Bluebird and then Malcolm. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So ultimately, like, I feel about gender in the same way that I feel about Puerto Rico or DC and the Electoral College. Like, I like the idea of like adding more states until it materially improves like trans people's lives, and we all realize it means absolutely nothing and gets abolished. You know, like. Yeah, but like I feel like we might be getting fixed up on this idea of like editing language, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like I feel like while we say that we're like linguistic descriptivists, we're still like almost connected to this idea of like linguistic prescriptivism, because in some way language is like a sixth sense. We see the world through language, we read books, and then we can like interpret entire stories through that. And like I don't want to like call that out on anyone, but I just think it could be interesting to like explore that idea, like whether internally or like on the panel if we have any time for that, you know.
We currently have about 4 minutes left in the general for this, so maybe at a future. I think I'll see if people are actually interested. We can get some linguists in here and like actually like a linguistics panel. I think that'd be really fun, like in the future as an idea. So, but right now, Jack, if you have like your words configured, we'll go to Jack, and then Malcolm. I really appreciate you being patient. We promise we'll get.
So this is transphobia. I just want to report that.
Sure.
I don't know who to report that to, but I have a serious complaint.
Complaint noted.
Me, I'll be the trans police.
Thank you. Get him.
I will share a cell. I'm gonna share a cell with Peterson, and he's gonna be the beta, and I will be the alpha. Go ahead.
Wait, who's the Sigma?
Also me.
Sigma balls.
It was like.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, like when I think we can maybe assuage some fears about like how this works, right? Because like all social constructions work differently depending on what they are, right? Like gender works differently than race, and I also think that within the gender construct, different genders are constructed differently, right? And I think if we look back at the past and the use of neo-pronouns in the past, we can kind of use that as a gauge going forward. And I have not seen evidence that there is a significant amount of push in the modern day for like the recognition of gendered people, or like that's a phrase that rose in like the 1860s and into like the 1930s, and
How
then just kind
contentious
of
should
fell
we
off
be
the face of the
with
earth.
our closing statements, lad?
So I understand the
They didn't
argument
pause 'cause they can hear me. They
against
can't hear
like we by constructing new genders or new recognitions of gender, we run the risk of perpetuating or recreating the same kinds of things that we're looking to deconstruct in the first place. I just think that there's not as much evidence as we might intuitively think if we look back at the history of those neo-pronouns and how they were used to construct identities in the past.
Thank
There
you,
we go.
Jack. Last.
No, can
statement-
I check with Vosh? Did it make sense?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'll respond in my closing.
Okay.
All right. Last statement for the general. And then Malcolm, you're also like the first person to go for the closing. So I'll give you like just like 3 minutes. Say whatever you want.
So much transphobia. I can't handle it.
I gave you more time. I put all of it together. Like
Now you're just
putting trans
tokenizing
people on
me
the
for
spot.
views. Like,
Wow.
what the fuck is that about? I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. I'm just giving you a hard time. I think so. Hans, your question was the idea about like people using like either they them or like other pronouns in lieu of neo or noun self pronouns, right?
like in the case like the what Denham's talked about, it's almost like a 2-tier system of pronouns where it's like there's like the general and then like hopefully like people will do X, but like you have the backups in case. So yeah, that was like the question.
Yeah. I wrote that down because I think that in general, the second tier system is usually reserved for people who are like unable to accommodate those pronouns.
So I don't look so sad.
thinking
I'm
of
playing
people
fucking
that,
Isaac.
like,
And I'm
English
kicking,
is not their first language, people that have like learning disabilities, people that have intellectual disabilities,
sad.
That are maybe unable to do those kinds of things.
You're just
that's
dumb.
usually like just like a courtesy for people who are unable to engage with them. Something that I think that is really difficult for me, and this is kind of what like changed my mind on neo and noun pronouns. I used to be like, no, fuck that. Like they make trans people look bad. Like I won't do this, that, and the other thing. The thing that kind of changed my mind is any kind of argument against like neo or noun pronouns just sounds like regurgitated like non-binary people make trans people look bad, or like trans trenders make trans people look bad. It just kind of sounds like those arguments just like a few words changed and then like spat right back at us. I think that the issue is like it comes down to this idea that there are like certain people whose identities are responsible for like, or they assume the burden of the scorn that the trans community receives because they have like atypical presentations or like atypical language that they use to describe themselves. And kind of what I talked about a little bit earlier is like, even if everybody in the trans community was like the perfect trans person that was Blair White, you know, like cis passing, like minded their P's and Q's, like maybe even in certain instances, like use their like biologically appropriate restroom. People would still take issue with the trans community and weaponize like the single outlier against us every single time. So I think it would make more sense for us to kind of like open up and be like, okay, like we're all different people. Gender is kind of like a personal experience. We're moving towards this idea of abolition or liberation in the first place. Something that can help us get there is kind of dismantling these ideas or these rules that we use to allow trans people to exist in cisgender society. Let them kind of like make it their own and then like dismantle it from the inside out and then move forward from there. I think that like my biggest issue, or like the one thing that really like changed my mind on this kind of discourse, is I can't think of a single argument that is used against like noun self or neo pronouns that is not used like religiously against quote unquote trans trenders or people that people assume are faking being trans for clout or attention or whatever, or non-binary people. Because for a really long time the hot discourse was non-binary people make trans people look bad. They make a joke out of binary trans people who work so fucking hard for cis approval to integrate into society and like mind their business so we can finally be taken seriously. But we've been waiting to be taken seriously for God knows how fucking long. It's never going to happen. It's time for us to just kind of like assume our own language, like explain our expressions and our identities in our own way. Like fuck placating cis people, fuck playing neutral, fuck playing nice. If you want to identify as a fucking chair, do it, dude. Liberate yourself. And that's it. Mic drop.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. Really appreciate
Ooh, fucking chair identity.
That's
We're
me.
We're gonna throw it to Lumi. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Listen, I'm just vibing. I think neo-pronouns are creative. I'm not worried that it's gonna become a super huge political capital issue. I appreciate the kind of taking care of all the ins and outs. I almost went that direction and said, well, if we have people starting to identify themselves based on like what the alpha males do, they're just sitting there identifying themselves as who they're supposed to have power over and what they're supposed to have. Now that I draw a line at, and I think they're interesting lines to talk about, but in general, I'm like, people with neo-pronouns, they're out there fighting for their neo-pronouns and trying to be creative. And I appreciate that because aren't we all fucking struggling with gender? I'm not out here trying to struggle with your struggle with gender. I'm just going to be like, you know what? Glad you're being creative. I might fuck it up, but I know how it is. I use they, them pronouns and people fuck it up all the time. And as long as I know you're sincere in trying to not fuck up, we're going to be cool.
Thank you so much, Lumi. And to be clear, the flexing during the alpha male thing was just a meme. Like, I don't buy into that like bullshit. Like,
oh no, you are definitely an alpha male. You don't even have to flex. I know.
Hanz, we all know you don't identify as a sigma male. It's okay.
Hey. Anyway, we're gonna go to Dennis. Yo, before I cancel myself, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I think that neo-pronouns are, they're just another more words that we came up with because we love coming up with words and we apparently don't have enough. And so I do think that like it feels bad that anyone sort of has to be concerned with like what the general populace will think of something, because it really is just like one of the most frustrating things about being in any minority group. It's like, okay, well, I have to, if you're like queer, it's like, okay, well, I have to please the straights so that like I can be accepted in this space. Or if you're brown or black, like code switching, and that stuff like genuinely sucks, which is why I'm pretty open to neo-pronouns. But yeah, I think that definitely talking about it and making it more accessible to more people would be ideal. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Sigma female Dennis. I really appreciate your words. We're gonna throw it to Vosh. Go ahead, buddy.
I want to be a little open-ended with this because it's just something that I think about with regards to identity. There's something that people on the left like to say, like accept all identities, always be accepting. But in reality, none of us actually believe that because there are identities that we reject. Like, say, for example, being super straight. If you get right down to the base of it, being super straight, that is to say, being heterosexual, but you're transphobic or you don't want that is technically something which conforms to any of our understandings and expectations of what a sexuality might be. Certainly by the standards of how people craft sexualities in the online left, but we reject it anyway. Why? Because it's harmful and transphobic, which means we're making arguments not of acceptance for all, but of utility. We do this for a lot of other stuff too. Like you pointed out, Lumi, alpha male, sigma male, we laugh at people when they say this. Now, what if a person started to demand they be called an alpha male with the same seriousness with which a trans woman demands we respect their identity? Well, that'd be a bit odd, I think. We have to consider the utilitarian nature, both of what these terms imply and of what we can do to defend them. Now, right now, neo-pronouns have never hurt anyone. I don't think they ever will. I have no interest whatsoever in telling people who adhere to them that they're doing something wrong, and I'll respect them. But I think it's important to be open to the utilitarian nature of identity and to make sure we're not constructing new categories around which people take offense and around which we must defend. Because if you end up doing that, return your thoughts to the samurai. The samurai would get offended over a lot of stuff that just doesn't matter today. If they constructed those identities again now, some modern samurai class, would we intent upon defending them even if we knew they were doing nothing but inviting offense at constructs that didn't exist before? It's only something to think about. At the moment, this causes no harm, and I respect it.
Appreciate it, Bosh. All right, Jack.
As quickly as I could get that all out.
I just want to say I've loved this panel. Like this panel has been really productive, has had a lot of thought-provoking ideas, and has made me like think about issues in ways that I hadn't necessarily done before. So Hanz, just thank you so much for hosting this panel and doing a wonderful job. and to everyone else on the panel who's made this like a super productive discussion. As far as like neo-pronouns go, I'm not kind of like Lumi. I'm just vibing. I think that it's fine. This is how language works, and I think it is probably a natural byproduct to the acceptance of trans people, just people experimenting with language. I don't think that it is currently causing that much harm. I understand how there are possibilities that it could in the future, but right now I'm not too bothered by it. And I figure whatever political crises come up, we can deal with them in turn. And the best way we can deal with them is by working together in solidarity. And also, fuck marketing companies, because the marketing companies use gender to sell you things, okay? It's hard to sell you things if you're Zers, okay? Anti-capitalism. Woo. All right.
Based.
Thank you, Jack. All right, last word on this, and don't worry, everyone. We can all do like plugs and stuff like after this. So just Bluebird, keep the closing, and everyone's done this really, really well. I appreciate this. Normally during the panels, like everyone like tries to rush through their like closing thoughts in the first 15 seconds because they're like, hey, like follow me here. Like I really appreciate that because I always give people time afterwards. So like let's just keep it based on the ideas first, and then we'll go back the opposite direction for everyone to plug themselves and shit like that. So go ahead, Bluebird.
Ultimately, like I agree with what Malcolm said in his closing statement that gender is like very personal. Like we all know how famously undefinable love is. Like it's super weird, and gender is very much the same thing. But we still try to define love for ourselves. Like there's like thousands of poems called like love song or a love story or something. But like I think that the idea of normalizing neo-pronouns, it's like I still feel like it's an intermediate between now and the quote end goal, which is, of course, as we all know, all trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people becoming multimillionaires. But I feel like this is just people trying to make up words for the same reason that we made up the rest of them, like to define and state the experiences that make us people, you know?
Yeah, thank you so much, Bluebird. So we're gonna go the opposite direction for plugs. So Bluebird, tell us anything last things about yourself and where people can find you and what you do, that kind of stuff.
I am a YouTuber. I am called Bluebird on YouTube. My channel is like as it's written on screen, Bluebird. Just type that in YouTube and I should come up. Also follow me on Twitter. Yeah. Also,
I think there's a good reason for it too. Frogs, lizards, reptiles don't have sexed characteristics in the same way mammals do. We don't recognize it in them.
Everyone, check out my Bluebird for
amphibians and reptiles
and
appear
Twitch,
genderless, essentially, to us.
Thank you so much for being
sexless.
Thanks. Everything I say is bad.
All right, Jack.
You can find me over on twitch.tv/riverboatjack or on Twitter, twitter.com/riverboatjack. I talk about socialism, decommodification, democracy in the workplace, debunking propaganda. I cover debates. I participate in debates. I'm pretty cool, and sometimes I play video games and do the voice work if there's none in it. So join in. Also, I play D&D with Hanz, which hopefully we can get back on that next week.
Please, like. Sorry, I'm not excited or anything. Anyway, thank you so much for being here, Jack, and everyone follow Jack. She's awesome. All right, and I love supporting small streamers, which is why I try and have them on my panel. So Vosh, shout yourself out. Just wanna. That was a joke. That was a joke. I
have no platform and no channel. Never visit me. In all seriousness, I delighted in this panel. It's probably one of the best I've ever been to. So thank you for putting it together.
No, I'm not gonna cry again. I'm not gonna do it again. This isn't gonna happen every time we talk. Okay. All right, we're gonna.
I dare you.
Alpha male destroyed.
They're coming. All right.
Han's true Sigma males cry on stream. Okay.
I will cry right now. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Denims. And also, everyone follow Vosh. Vosh is cool. All right, go ahead, Denims.
I have my moments.
Yeah, I'm Denims. I do streaming. I stream every day except for Monday at 7 a.m. PST. And yeah, tomorrow we're watching Gordon Ramsay, so it'll be fun.
This panel was fucking raw. Everyone, everyone follow Dennis. All right, and then Lumi, thank you so much. Excellent finally like actually talking to you and meeting you. This has been really, really cool.
This is the first
Shout
time.
yourself out and all that sort of stuff.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the panel. I got to see a lot of new cool faces. Jack, fantastic meeting you. Malcolm, my Bluebird. Vosh and Denham's always great catching up. By the way, I'm Lumi. They, them pronouns. Talk about intersectional feminism. I'm really into like how everything connects. Very anti-oppression. Try to create a space where we can talk about deep, difficult political topics while still maintaining a somewhat cozy atmosphere, because I really think it's important for people to be able to learn in a cozier atmosphere. You can find me on twitch.tv/LumiRu. All of my social medias are LumiRu and then LUV. Tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we're going to be talking about men. It's our monthly men stream. We're going to be talking about masculinity, success, friendship, fathers, stuff like that. I'd love to have you there. Whether you're a dude, a dudette, or a non-dude or dudette person like myself.
Thank you so much, Lumi.
Thank you for having me.
You're awesome.
Lumi, you're so cool.
Super cozy. All right, we're gonna
So true.
go to Malcolm. Dude, thank you so much for being here. Shout yourself out. Tell us where you go. I'll link your Twitch channel in chat. All that sort of stuff. So go ahead. Muted? Or are you? Wait, 1 second. Oh, is you're muting Discord. I'll
Moot.
Oh,
I'm literally the worst person in the entire world. I'm so sorry.
Second worst.
I can't believe that Discord just muted me like that. That's transphobic. We should tell somebody about that.
So true.
I'm Malcolm. I go by he, him pronouns. I stream almost exclusively like trans masculine perspectives on trans political issues, transgender issues at large in general.
You
just
had me at
because
masculine.
Trans people, like trans masculine people, like trans men, we just like don't exist. Like we're just like shadow people. People just assume that only trans women exist. So that's something that I'm really passionate about, something I really care about. I'm also a true scum slayer. Most notably, I bodied Calvin Guerra live in 4K.
True.
And I'm happy to body anybody else that wants to argue trans medicalism to me. You can find me on YouTube. My YouTube channel is Goddammit Malcolm. That's the easiest way to find me. Everything else is spelt like super fucking weird and fucked up. But yeah, I enjoy talking about trans-related content, trans medicalism, things like that. Right now, we're reading Irreversible Damage on stream. This is my second time reading Irreversible Damage, and the only irreversible damage that's real is the loss of my brain cells from such an abhorrently stupid fucking dumb book. So if you would like to come and suffer, I read on Tuesdays at around like 5 p.m. PST. So cool.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. And then everyone, thank you all of my wonderful panelists. Thanks to everyone who watched this stream. Self shout-outs. Hi, I'm Hanz. I actually do have political opinions. I talk to them on my solo streams or when I go on panels. But I host panels like this every single Saturday. Normally, they're not as wholesome and cozy as this. They're considerably spicier, but still extremely informative. So make sure you follow me for those. Tomorrow, I am hosting a small streamers panel. So if you want to see small streamers like Vosh, come on here to hopefully get their names out there, trying to give back to the Twitch community, because I wouldn't be where I'm at without excellent panelists like Dylan Burns and Prime Kais, who gave me a shot when I was small, and I've grown on this platform in the last like 9 months only because of like the exposure that these excellent guys have done for me. So I'm trying to give back. So definitely check me out tomorrow. And then my usual weekly content is I'll do reacts while playing Pokemon and Magic the Gathering, because I am a nerd and I'm also like I have the heart of the cards. So follow me for all that sort of stuff, and I'll see you all tomorrow. I'm gonna hang out for the rest of the night, play some Magic the Gathering, but I'm gonna do that off stream. I'm gonna raid a friend Shark Zero. Until next time, thank you panelists all so much, and you're all poggers. And I also started using that in the last couple months, and I can't stop. I say it at work, and people look at me like I'm fucking nuts, but I refuse to quit. I will change the language.
Super base using pog self pronouns, Hans. Very well to do.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you for the lovely panel.
Thank you all so much.
It's been neat. It's been wonderful, you know.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Peace
Good night.
and blessings, homies.
Peace and blessings. Catch you all on the later innie. Have a good.
Peace and blessings. What am I, a fucking hippie? Whoa, push to talk. My God. All right, I think we did the best we could there.